And here we are, streaming away, live, here we go. For those of you who are just tuning in, listening in, maybe through a podcast or some kind of podcast service, what we do here at the Canadian Commie is we are reading news articles, commenting on the decline of Western civilization and the coming collapses and the way that the society and civilization is going. We're a solidarity movement. We are hoping to do something, maybe, about what is happening. I am simultaneously live streaming over on YouTube. You can find me at thecanadiancommie.com. I live stream 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Get my content out into the world to try to influence the zeitgeist and, more importantly, help people get through this absolute overwhelming catastrophe that is the collapse of our society. If you would like to join in with the chat, if you'd like to have a question answered, if you'd like to participate, just go to www.thecanadiancommie.com. Take you right to the YouTube channel. You can subscribe. You can join into the live stream. You can have a conversation. You can do all that kind of stuff. I know for a fact that the work that I'm doing is important. I recently went to get a psych evaluation for ADHD. My sister has been sort of talking to me about it more and more, and I thought, what the heck? Here in Canada, that's covered, so I'm going to go do that. And while I was in the office, the guy said to me, "Do you have any anxieties, fears, heights, Trump?" I thought to myself, yeah, I think this guy is hearing a lot about what's going on. Peanut Butter Beatrice, Conton, Azeron, Gabriel, good to see you guys. Always an absolute pleasure. Someone gave me the nicest compliment they could have possibly given to me today. They said, listening to you is ACMR for my ears. And I was just like, yeah, perfect. Perfect. I hope that you're enjoying just listening to the smoothness of my voice. Would you like to swing on a star? This is from Peanut Butter Beatrice. I'm not just randomly singing. Carry moonbeams home in a jar and be better off than you are. Ba ba ba. Or would you rather be a pig? Well, a pig is an animal with dirt on his face. His shoes are a terrible disgrace. He makes loud noises as he chooses food. He's fat and lazy and extremely rude. But if you don't care a feather or a fig, ba-da-ba, you could grow up to be a pig. Or would you like to swing on a star? Carry moonbeams home in a jar and be better off than you are. You could be better than you are. You could be swinging on a star. Meow, 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 yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I should have been born 1945, right? Frank Sinatra, eat your heart out. Big band stuff, man. That'd be so good to get a big band together. Gabriel writes, howdy, do you think Russia can become communist again after Putin leaves? I think it is possible that could potentially happen, but pretty unlikely, I think. Like I think that the trend of what's going on outside of America is the hope is to develop peacefully. This is the hope, right? This is what China hopes. This is what Russia wanted. This is what the whole thing was about. And you can't develop peacefully by sticking your thumb in the eye of your historical antagonists. And so I think that Russia is going to feel very, even though they're in this kind of antagonistic relationship with the West right at the moment, they have this war going on in Ukraine against NATO and against Western forces. They know that they can't, they know where this can go, right? Like this is the big thing that, like, the Soviet Union and Lenin and Stalin and all these guys, there's just no way these guys could have predicted the scale of the war. There's just no way that, even looking at World War I, they just could not have predicted the mass scale and the absolute absurdity, the lengths that the capitalists would be willing to go. I think that's the big one. Is that they just, like, we have the benefit of hindsight. We have the benefit to be able to look back on the past and say, okay, like, look at the hell, look at the depths, the bottom floor of hell, right? The capitalists are willing to go there. They are willing to go there. That they genuinely are operating on the principle that it is better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. That they would rather be the king of an ash pile than be unequal with people they consider to be their inferiors. And that is absolutely fundamentally the truth. And something that the capitalists through World War II explicitly proved. So everything that unfolded post World War II fell into this pattern of appeasement and this pattern of capitulation. And the West, I think, did a fairly decent job of driving a wedge between Russia and China. But now that Russia and China have kind of found each other again, because the West foolishly drove Putin into the hands of the Chinese, the Chinese and the Russians, I think, are going to be a lot more delicate. I think they're going to be a lot more delicate. That China has been governed by a communist party since 1949. It is a revolutionary communist party ruling a revolutionary communist government that has not been corrupted by capitalist forces. And they're just really, if you listen to the Chinese, they're really working to not put their thumb in the eye of the Americans. They're just trying really hard to not put their thumb in the eye of the Americans. All of their ambassadors are just like, okay. Like, you can find, like, individual media figures. You can find people within Chinese society that will stick their thumb in the eye of individual journalists and people like this. But as on the largest possible trend, the Chinese are not standing up and trying to say, we're here to replace global capitalism. We're here, we're here, we're not here to work with capitalists. We're not here to be collaborative. We're not here to work together for the mutual benefit of both of our societies. We're here to replace the system of global capital. Well, that's war. You're declaring a war. And so how this is a big, long diatribe that I'm going through just to kind of paint a larger picture, to place Putin leaving. I think that what happens is that Putin gets replaced with somebody who is more hawkish than he is. I think that is generally true. I think there's likely the society is going to be looking for a hardliner. That Putin is not really seen as a hardliner. Putin really was like conciliatory. If it was up to him, like if you put a magic wand in front of Putin and said, "Hey Putin, you get a wish for Russia's future," at the beginning of his term, he would have been like, "We're part of NATO, and we're part of the EU." That was what Putin wanted. And it shows his agility as a leader and his ability to be flexible as a leader, that he managed to pivot, and he managed to survive that pivot as a leader. I think that shows a wisdom and an astuteness that exists at his level of politics. As much as we like to critique sort of his thuggishness and all that kind of stuff, like we said about Stalin and Mao and like everybody, right? So there's nothing new there. But I do think that Russian society is settled in to the idea that, okay, we are not moving in with the West. That is not happening. And so the next leader after Putin, will it be a communist? Will it be a like Stalinist communist? Probably not. But it will likely be a hardliner. It will likely be somebody that stands up and says, we have to move away from neoliberal capitalism, and we've got to get away from these systems, and we've got to move towards something that's better for Russia, and we've got to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that'll be very popular, and it'll flow in pretty well. And the big danger from the Western perspective is that they've bungled this so badly. Like, I can't even express to you guys how badly they've bungled their relationship with Russia. They literally had Russia basically at their beck and call, saying to them, hey, can we be part of NATO? Hey, can we be part of the IMF? Hey, can we be part of these larger organizations? Hey, can we join? Right? Can we buddy up? Can we ally with you? While simultaneously they have this conciliatory relationship based on a capitulation after the Vietnam War with China. Like that's the best case scenario for America moving into this new era. And they blew it up. They absolutely blew it up. Like, and I still don't quite understand why. Like, the only explanation I can come up with is just basic xenophobia. Just basic, like, Russians are orcs kind of thinking. Because, like, why would they ever think that that's a good idea? Like, it's 100% a good idea to keep Russia in the fold and keep Russia on side and keep Russia away from China and Africa and keep them away from all of this. Keep them keep them in the house, keep them in the group. So I think that, and the big danger, of course, now is that because of what America has done and because of how Russia has responded to it, Russian society is far more militant than it was before. It's a much more militant society now. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who have experienced direct warfare and have experienced direct combat and feel patriotic about it. They're not going home the way that, like, Iraqi war vets go home and are like, why did we fight this war? What was this for? Oh, it was just for a bunch of rich guys? Oh, they don't feel this way. They feel like this is a necessary war, that was a patriotic war that was thrust upon them, and that they did right by their people, right? That creates a more militant society, and it's very, very likely that the guy that precedes Putin, the guy that comes after Putin, is going to be of that militant mind, that is going to evoke this militant imagery, that is going to talk about the veterans, that is going to talk about the good soldiers that fought in the Ukrainian war, and they'll come up with like some name for it that is like the Great Patriotic War, right? Which is what they call World War II. They call World War II the Great Patriotic War, and they'll come up with some name along those lines as well. It'll be like the I don't know, the Great Conciliatory War, or the Great the Great Turning, or something, right? And and yeah, so I think that the Americans have really fumbled the ball when it comes to Russia, and they could have had a friend, and instead they made an enemy for no reason at all. And the guy that comes after Putin, like, Putin's big wish is for friendship. Well, the guy that comes after Putin is not going to be looking for friendship, and I think that's a real shame. That's a real shame, but that's what it is, right? That's what it is. Azron, I have a couple questions I always forget once I'm in the chat. Yeah, that sounds like me, Azron. Well, if they bubble to the surface, woke CIA drone pilot over on Twitch, good to see you. The Canadian commie is rising. Yeah, one hopes, I hope. A good way for you guys to make sure that the Canadian commie rises is to like, share, and subscribe. Tell people I exist, and make sure you donate to the Patreon, patreon.com/the Canadian commie. But yeah, tell people I exist. That's the big way. Send it around. Hope you guys are doing well out there in the world. One day I hope to never have to ask for money again. One day I hope money doesn't exist anymore and that we use it as bookmarks and shit. XD writes, Ultras see this and will say China is collaborating with U.S. imperialism. I mean, what's the alternative? Like, that's why I don't take sort of that ultra-left position very seriously, and I get very suspicious of it, because it's so detached from any serious, credible analysis that I think could be done. Like, if the alternative is open warfare with a nuclear superpower that has proven its willingness to drop bombs, to drop nukes near you, and has threatened in living memory to drop nukes on you, like Dwight D. Eisenhower threatened to drop nukes on China, Nixon threatened to drop nukes on Vietnam and in the region. It is not off the table, even a little tiny bit, as far as anybody is concerned. I think that if you look at America and think to yourself, oh, this is a rational group of people that can certainly be negotiated with, I think that you're way off course, way off course, that the Chinese find themselves in a position where the choice is accept American business or accept American bombs. And I think they're making the right choice. The question for China is, can they defend themselves from the political attacks from America? That's the real question. That China has done a really, really good job of creating clear, distinct lines because they've read Lenin, because they've read Stalin, because they've read Trotsky, because they've read Mao, because they've read all of this theory and all of this literature, right? Because they're extremely dedicated and extremely interested and extremely motivated to ensure that their country doesn't fall into the hands of foreign capital and international capital or international bourgeois. And they're desperately interested and motivated in the idea of ensuring that their country is prosperous and strong and powerful. They don't want to return to the 100 years of humiliation. They're not interested in that at all. And so they've created hard lines. China owns its own resource base. It owns its banks. The National People's Congress has not been infected by capitalist forces. They are, and they draw those lines distinctly, and they see it very clearly that way. Like, to call China imperialist, sometimes people will say that China is imperialist. It's a total fucking joke. How is it possible that China is imperialist? The definition of imperialism that Lenin gave is a monopoly of finance capital that uses military power to spread itself abroad. The National People's Congress owns the banks. There's not one financial capitalist organization in China. They're owned by the state. And the state is elected by the people and controlled by the Communist Party of China. Like, what world are you living in? And the answer is that they're not really analyzing China, right? Literally all they have done is they have looked at China and seen that there's the gap, right? That, oh, well, there's an Apple iTunes store. And there's a factory there where they manufacture some things and it's privately held. Therefore, China is capitalist. And that's the full extent of their analysis. They have not gone one step farther than that. They haven't discussed the Korean War. They haven't discussed or analyzed the Vietnam War. They haven't discussed seriously the relationship between Mao, Nixon, and Deng. They haven't seriously done that analysis whatsoever. That even if you do the most robust material analysis of a society that you possibly can, right? Even if you do this an incredibly deep, long-winded, you can write tomes. You can write 2,000 pages of the material conditions of modern-day China, and you could be 100% correct. Well, you're only 50% of the way there, because Marxism is a material historical dialectic. And if you refused to do, and if you refuse, just simply refuse. And at this point, it has to be called a refusal. Like it cannot be called anything other than just an abject, total refusal to do a historical analysis. Well, then you fail, right? 50% is not a passing grade, right? Like, if you nail 100%, 50%, if you're at exactly 50%, sure, you get a D-. Great, right? But chances are good your material analysis is lacking at least 0.1%. So you fail. So you've got to include a historical analysis. And if you refuse to include the historical analysis, then we don't need to take you seriously. Like, it always blows me away to see these quote-unquote Marxists walking around talking about China with just no awareness of the history of China. Just absolutely no connection whatsoever of what's actually going on in that country. What happened 30 years ago? What happened 5 years ago? What happened yesterday? They don't know. And all you end up with is a guy who, when they do look at the history of China, it's just to cherry pick information to confirm their bias. Because at the end of the day, white Westerners are xenophobes, right? Like, we have within us this settler colonialist ideology. And just because we've managed to get to a point where we can say, okay, genocide against the First Nations people and slavery is wrong, and my ancestors did that. Okay. Well, that doesn't mean that you've gotten to the point where you actually see other nations as your peers. And you certainly are not going to see another nation of non-white people as your superiors. You're certainly not going to look at them and think, oh, here's a country that actually did a successful communist revolution and now is having an economic war, economic fight against the system of capital and succeeding. You're definitely not going to look at that. You're always going to be pedantic. You're always going to be lecturing. You're always going to be talking as though you, as the white Westerner who has never experienced a revolution, who has never governed for a second in your life, who has never had to even do politics in any way that could be described as serious, you know more about than the institution that has existed now since 1949. You know more than that. Okay. Unserious. And this is my larger critique of sort of white Western Marxists generally, is they just have this kind of attitude of superiority that is unearned entirely. Like, congratulations, you read Marx and maybe you read Lenin. Good for you. Now look at the history of China. Right? Now look at its actual history and what actually happened, and think about, if I had to choose between nuclear bombardment of my society and letting the Gap in, I know which way I would go. We have a new commenter over on Twitch. Your neighborly sheet poster. That's a pretty funny name, my man. So, you, just like the fall of the Roman Empire, you can't peg it at a single moment, right? There's no, and people will try to be like, oh, well, this moment is clearly a declining moment, and this moment is clearly a declining moment, but it's like we're in a building that's falling over in slow motion, right? That's what we're experiencing. Like, and the building is like right here, right? It's not here, it's right here. But if you were to see a building, and you were to see it in this position, and you were to watch a picture, like you looked at a picture, and there's the building, right, like that, it's not predictive, and it's not prophecy to say that the building goes like that, right? Especially when there's, like, literally nobody trying to push it back up. Like, down it goes. So we are in the midst of its collapse. We might not even be alive to see it completely turn to rubble, right? Like, it's very difficult to say how quickly it's going to go and how quickly it's going to fall, right? That's very difficult. And so you can't, like, peg dates. And sometimes people do, and I think that's very brave and bold and sometimes kind of reckless, I think. But to say that the whole structure of America and the West is not going into this direction, I think that's lunacy. It obviously is. Like, it obviously is. How do we know when it will fall? It is falling. It is currently in the state of falling. Tower of Pisa is doing fine, right? No. I think I can say pretty clearly at this point that you are intentionally not understanding what I'm saying, right? So I'm gonna say it again, and I'm gonna try to use a different tactic. Please try to actually understand what I'm saying. Like, intentionally try to understand. Don't intentionally try not to understand, like you're doing now. Try to intentionally understand, right? Because if you're going to just if you're going to intentionally misunderstand, then there's no point to continue with you, right? So if you are a student of history, if you pay attention to history, every society and every empire moves into a decline. It is what happens to empires. If you look at the history of the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Russian Empire, the Chinese empires several times over, the Indian empires, the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Grecian Empire, the Mongolian Empire, they all go into a pattern of decline, and they all decline. It doesn't mean they go and the thing falls on its face, right? Doesn't mean they're like this and they're strong and they're stable, and then tomorrow it's like that, right? That's not how it works. But they do go into a decline, and they do start that decline. And the reason why I think it's important to discuss it is so that we can have an idea moving into the future. We can set an expectation for what the future is going to look like that is realistic, that is not, so that we can deal with the reality of our circumstances and the material reality of our circumstances, not just through our own organization and our own desires to prevent the worst outcomes from happening in our own neighborhoods and our own society, but also just for our own mental stability and just for our own ability to operate in the world as it is. That, like, the number 2 or 3 cause of death in my cohort, right? I'm a millennial. The number, like, 2 or 3 cause of death right now is suicide, right? And I'm more or less of the opinion that's because there is this expectation of infinite growth and infinite prosperity, an infinite linear line upwards, and infinite towards and upward we go, and that if you aren't experiencing that, you're a failure, everything's terrible, you need to do better, right? This individualist pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which I fundamentally reject. That what we are experiencing, and I can get into how it is or why it is we know the empire is in decline, which I think is important. But setting that expectation for yourself is just going to help people understand what's going on around them. Like, there's lots of people in the world who simply do not understand Donald Trump. They don't understand him as a phenomenon, and they don't understand why he's there. But from my perspective, he's completely, like, there's nothing mysterious about him whatsoever. So I hope that answers your question. Your neighborly contingent, I'll check on you once in a while and ask it if has fallen or not. I just don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. Like Italy still exists, right? The Roman Empire doesn't exist. Like, I just don't know what it is you're expecting. Joe writes, I give China a lot of credit for not succumbing to Western provocations. China's idea and China's theory moving forward is very simply just wait them out. Right? China doesn't, unless America literally moves into like Taiwan or something, right? Unless they like literally move forces in and like actually launch something that has to be responded to, they could just wait it out, right? Like they're looking at the situation as it is in America, they're looking at the situation as it is in China, and the Chinese are very realistic. And they're just saying to themselves, okay, if these trends continue, right, we don't need to do anything. We can just wait them out. Joe writes, a liberal friend of mine, well, already, they've sort of given away the game, right? At this stage in the game, to call yourself a liberal is to basically just be like, I'm a death cultist of capital, right? I'm just worshiping money. The system of capital will live a billion years. We don't need to pay any attention to the evidence or history or facts or anything like that. We can just be liberal, I guess, at this point. Like, I think liberal at this point is the position I respect the least. I think I respect conservatives more than I respect liberals. Because liberals are living in a fantasy world. They're just completely disconnected from reality. And while conservatives have a good deal of delusion in them as well, Christian fundamentalism, the MAGA crowd generally, they're not actively trying to be duplicitous. Whereas I do think that liberals are trying to be duplicitous on purpose. Called Putin a theocratic fascist. Yeah, your friend doesn't know what theocracy is, nor does he understand what fascism is. Like, pretty nakedly. Like, Putin is a conservative. That's it. He's just a conservative. He cares about the future of Russia, and he cares about maintaining the traditions of Russia. He cares about Russia as an idea and as a concept. And he wants to do right by the Russian people. I think Putin is a conservative. I think he's always been a conservative. That he came into power to continue the plan and continue the project, which was put in place for the benefit of Russia, he said, and he believed. And once that became untenable, he was forced to pivot. But the idea that he's like... I just think to call Putin a fascist is to just admit that you don't know what fascism is, and you don't understand how it operates. And to say that he's theocratic, like, I mean... JFK was a Catholic. Does that mean that America was a theocracy when JFK was in power? Like, just because Putin has like an Eastern Orthodox background, does that instantly make Russia a theocracy? And does that make Putin interested in ruling Russia as a theocrat? I just don't think so. I just don't think it's serious. Like, if I had to peg Putin with an ism, and I've been really trying to be careful with these labels, because I don't really... I like to take seriously when a person calls themselves something, right? I like to take that seriously and actually look at it and be like, okay, well, you think that you're like this, so where do you fit? Putin doesn't really do that to himself. And so it's conservative, right? It's conservative. Would be the name that I would give. Armed with Opinion says, I'm rooting for Putin. I wouldn't say that I'm rooting for Putin, but just that I respect the position that Putin has been put in. That's all. That, like, Putin has been forced into a position that I think he doesn't want to be in, and I think that he's handling himself pretty well, I'd say. Joe says that same liberal friend also called Putin a child hospital bombing thug. Well, that's been in the news cycle recently, right? That's been in the news cycle recently. Russia did drop a bomb on a hospital in Kiev. The story there, of course, is that Russia is bombing Kiev. Like, that's the story. Isn't it interesting that Western media has just kind of glossed over the fact that, like, Russia has gotten to the point now amidst this conflict where they're actually bombing Kiev and they're actually in the midst of military action in Kiev. But so it's this hyper focusing on this one moment with no, like, was it intentional? Like, when the Zionists bomb a hospital, it's intentional, right? They do it completely on purpose. They say that they're going to do it. They do it, right? And then but when the Russians engage in military activity and the bomb goes off, 100 meters to the left or to the right, and it happens to hit a place that it shouldn't hit, that becomes the fullness of the story, right? Like, this is pretty common in these sorts of discourses, is to take a single event that happened that and then escalate that into to decontextualize it from the situation it is, and then escalate it into, or elevate it into, universality. That single moment in time is the defining characteristic of millions of people and an entire history of what's going on. I just don't take that very seriously. I wish it didn't happen, and I bet you anything the Russians wish it didn't happen. Right? Because Russia has shown pretty clearly that they're not being indiscriminate. If you want to see indiscriminacy, you can just take a look at Gaza. Right? That's indiscriminate. The Russians could become indiscriminate. And, like, the Russians are wrecking Ukraine, without a doubt. Like, they're not interested in leaving Ukraine in a position where it can organize itself effectively. But I don't know. I just don't think your friend is being very. I think your friend is being very emotional, because it's an emotional issue, and it is an emotional issue. It's an enormously emotional issue. So I don't, like, blame them so much for that, but I just don't think they have much of an analysis. Yeah, he was apparently triggered by a recent pic of Modi and Putin hugging. Yeah. Oh no, diplomacy. Oh shit. The more and more I read and learn about the West and about other countries, China and India and Russia, the more I see that there's the West doesn't understand what diplomacy is, right? They just don't understand what diplomacy is at all. There's a story going on. For those of you who are listening at home, I'm opening up a map right now and zooming in on a territory that exists between where exactly was that? Yeah, here we go. Yeah. That exists between India and China. It's called the Arunachal Pradesh. Right? If you look at it on Google Maps, you'll see that there are dotted lines here. And that's because this territory, for like 100 years now, has been disputed. It's disputed territory between India and China. And India is trying to develop in that territory. I believe there's a river system in here that they are talking about damming up, and they're talking about putting a dam there. Well, that water goes into China, and of course, China is interested in maintaining water supplies and maintaining its own kind of stuff. And so they're looking at India being like, hey, we don't want you to do that. And India says, well, this is our territory. And China says, but we think it's our territory. So it's a border dispute, right? And so here in the West, we look at that and say, that means that they're deathly enemies with one another, and nuclear war is on the table, and they're going to constantly be fighting over this, and this is the only thing that can possibly matter. They're going to invade, and people are going to get deposed, and there's going to be a coup. No. Like, they'll talk about it, and it'll be a discussion, and it'll be something that they'll have concerns over, but China and India understand that this is not the defining characteristic of their relationship, right? This border dispute is not the totality of the relationship between India and China. And they understand that this is going to take diplomacy, and there's going to have to be gives and takes. And India's interested in building that infrastructure, and China is going to say, okay, well, if you're going to build that, it's going to have this effect on us, so we want some compensation, or maybe we can come up with some kind of idea, and maybe we should resolve this border dispute. What do you think about that? Right? The West doesn't understand that at all. We don't understand that at all. We're a society of, like, our country was built by slavers, corporatists, and monarchs in order to maintain slavery, corporatism, and monarchy. That's how our system came to be, right? And these lines were drawn in order to maintain those systems. And so when there's a border dispute for us, it's slavers and corporatists and monarchists, and we've seen that over and over in history, that the second there's any kind of border dispute whatsoever, call the banners, big giant war needs to happen, right? In Russia, if a guy gets assassinated, they have trials, and we call it the Great Terror when there's a trial. In Europe, if a guy gets assassinated, you end up with World War I. So we don't really understand diplomacy. We don't really do diplomacy. To us, diplomacy is showing up, dictating terms, and expecting those terms to be followed. And if they're not followed, then we'll bomb you. And that's what we call diplomacy. Well, other countries don't operate that way, right? They like, maybe Russia does look at Modi and think to himself, don't love everything this guy's doing. Not a big fan. But he also understands that, like, India has resources, and India is a geopolitical partner, and India exists in the world. And you've got to negotiate with these people, and you've got to negotiate with them as they are, and not what you want them to be and what you wish they were, right? Like, Russia can't push India around. Russia can't push Modi around, right? So he wants to have good relations with these countries. Like, and if Russia, like this is what's so wild about this kind of idea, that Russia and India, that Putin and Modi should not have good relations with one another. Well, if you didn't want Putin to have good relations with Modi, you probably shouldn't have pushed him out of NATO. You probably shouldn't have pushed him out of the EU. You should have probably let him come into this alliance and kept him close to you, right? So that he wouldn't feel like he needs to build partnerships with people like Modi, right? Like, I just feel like the Americans are actively fumbling this ball and doing it on purpose at this point. Like, it's just like what I said before about this other fellow. Like, they're just purposefully misunderstanding the situation at this point. Like, it couldn't be more obvious what's actually going on. Eggs D writes, I don't recall China under Mao any less scrutinized in the West than China today. I don't recall China under Mao any less scrutinized in the West than China today. I mean, but it's the same type of analysis, right? Like just disconnect any action that happens in China from what we are doing to China. So, like, it's like how we describe the Great Leap Forward, right? Every single time I see the Great Leap Forward discussed, it's just completely disassociated from the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the threats of nuclear bombardment, right? Like, there's just no historical analysis whatsoever. It's just something the Chinese did because they wanted to, and that's how it's pitched at us, with the most ridiculous, idiotic explanations you've ever heard. Like, they killed a bunch of sparrows, and the sparrows were responsible for eating worms, and the worms were responsible for tilling the fields, and so by killing the sparrows, they created a series of events, and that's what led to the famine. It's like dead-brained loser talk that only a moron would believe, right? The reason why there was a famine in China is because the Chinese were so fucking terrified of a nuclear superpower dropping nukes on them and destroying Korea beside them and destroying Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia right in front of their fucking eyes, that they launched an initiative to try to militarize themselves as fast as fucking possible. And in the course of doing that, they pulled resources as swiftly as possible away from the domestic population into the military population, and it created a famine. Absolutely it did. Because they were terrorized. They were just fucking out of their mind bonkers. Like, it'd be like watching somebody running away from Jason Voorhees, screaming their head off, and then being like, what a crazy person. Look at how crazy they are, all sweaty and gross. Like, that's the childishness of this analysis that comes out of the West. And it hasn't evolved at all. It's the same childish analysis. Like, when we look at China, you know what we call China's diplomacy right now? We call it wolf warrior diplomacy, which is just like a hair's breadth away from just being like the most racist shit ever. Just like yellow panda diplomacy. Or crazy thought, it's just diplomacy. It's just literally China being like, oh, we are in a position now where we can gain prominence on the world stage, and so we're going to do international diplomacy now. Wolf warrior. China doesn't call it that. We do. And we've given it this like kind of hokey, dumb bullshit, like Orientalist name. Because we're not a very intelligent people. Radio writes, just had an ad from Jugmeat talking about how NDP will confront corporate profits. Sure, bud. Like, sure you will. I just don't believe you. Right? I just don't. June writes, John, what books about socialism with Chinese characteristics would you recommend? I mean, The Governance of China is a good start. That's Xi Jinping's books. His speeches, basically, about socialism with Chinese... Because it's Xi Jinping that puts forward the concept of socialism with Chinese characteristics. There was a speech he gave, I think, in 2013, where he talked pretty broadly about that. And but to really understand China, I think that just looking at the basic history and just trying to take the position of China, right? Like, I'm not ashamed to say this. The Wikipedia articles are good. They are. Right? You can take a look at the Chinese Communist Party, or the Communist Party of China, rather. You can take a look at the National People's Congress. You can take a look at Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Maoist thought, Dengist thought, Jiang Zemin, Hu Mintao. You can take a look at these guys, right? And you can read the Wikipedia articles. It's dense. There's tons of information there. And then you can look at the sources, right? And sure, every so often you're going to find there is like that Western bias, authoritarianism kind of line. But the facts are all there, right? The facts are all there. Like, it's all, the history is all there. Like, it's very clear. Like, one of the things that's fascinating about China is that they have one of the oldest written histories. That there are countries and societies that are just as old as China, but usually when they go through these empire declines, it results in a catastrophe, right? And that catastrophe usually means you lose a lot of documents, and you lose a lot of evidence, and you lose a lot of stuff. And so there are countries that have like lost a lot of their history, but China hasn't. It's really kept these records intact, and so they've got this long, like 4,000-year-old written history of themselves, which they take extremely seriously. And so I wouldn't be surprised to find out at all that there's like an entire organization, an entire institution coming out of China that's just like this Wikipedia stuff that exists in the United States. We're going to make sure it's accurate. Sure, we'll let them call it what they want to call it, but like the information is going to be accurate. This is one of the things that I've really come to believe about China, right? And the Chinese will say this on their own social medias, which I always find to be very funny. The Great Firewall of China that divides the social media spheres between China and the United States, it doesn't exist to protect China. It exists to protect the United States. Because if these two groups actually were to mingle with one another, The Americans would just be overwhelmed. Like they just don't understand what it would be like for them, right? They think that they would walk into that situation and like air their grievances or say something and be taken seriously, and they would be bullied. They would be bullied and they would be overwhelmed because like America has a population of 350 million, China has a population of 1.5 billion. It's just going to be pretty clear what would happen there, right? So my recommendations for learning more about China is to just read. Just keep reading. And I know that we make fun of like Wikipedia articles, like we make fun of that, but like the information's right there. Like it's thorough and it's dense and it's well sourced. And Deng Xiaoping thought, Mao Zedong thought, Xi Jinping thought. These are web pages. Like these are with good information in them. My only critique of like Wikipedia style research is that it's often isolated, right? That's the reason why researchers and that's the reason why writers are important in that discourse, because they take these disparate events and these different situations that are happening and create a larger picture with them, like, which is kind of what I'm doing in regards to China and Chinese history, or modern Chinese history, right? I refuse to isolate the Vietnam War and the Korean War from China. Like, it obviously happened and it was obviously impactful. You don't send 300,000 troops to Vietnam and have it mean nothing. So, but yeah, like all this information is like, it's totally open. Like it's completely open. The idea that China is this like shadowy, closed country that's not sharing anything, like everything's right there. It's as naked as it could possibly be, and free. Joe writes, I sure don't refer to myself as liberal, but I have family and friends who do. Yeah, they just don't want to admit that they're conservatives. That's all. Yet the East is still red. Chinese socialism in the 21st century. Yeah, that's a good one. I've got a book coming right now. I forget the title of it, but it's a historical analysis of Xi Jinping, and I'm really looking forward to it. Because the more I learn about Xi Jinping, the more I'm just like, he is a man of the Chinese Communist Party. Like he is very much like you compare Xi Jinping to someone like Joe Biden or Donald Trump, right? Who are also creatures of their systems. And it becomes really clear which system has superiority. Transylvanian writes, I would ask a theocracy of which religion? Because Russia has huge religious minorities. If they ever want anywhere close to anything resembling Christian theocracy, all the Muslims would rebel. Yeah, Russia gets pegged with all kinds of stuff, right? It's an ethno state. I've heard that called. Russia is one of the most diverse, ethnically diverse countries in the world, right? And you just look at it on a map and you're immediately like, yeah, that's true. There's just like no way that this place is a single homogenous race, right? It's huge. Russia's a massive place with its own history, with a big long history of its own, right? And there's a lot of immigration, and there's a lot of displacement. There's a lot of things that happen throughout this period of time. Throughout the Russian history. Russia is one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. And you just need to listen to Putin's speeches, where he talks about ethnicity and he talks about religion. And he's just very open about how it's like, yeah, we are ethnically and religiously diverse. That is the strength of Russia. We are supposed to be that way. We understand that there is no right one way to do this. And that everybody is trying to seek what they are doing, following the tradition of their own ancestors and their own families, while existing in a public space with one another. And we understand that in this case, diversity is what makes Russia strong. Like, that's the way Putin talks about this stuff. Anytime there's a Muslim holiday, he goes to the mosques and he gives a speech about how important it is to have strength between the Muslims and the Christians in Russia. Anytime there's any kind of ethnic holiday, he goes to that to the center of that ethnic group And he gives a speech about how important diversity is and how important it is that we are all together, that we are all different but unified together in Russia, right? Like the idea that Russia exists as like this homogenous ethno-state or a homogenous theocracy is just a tacit admission of illiteracy. It's just a fundamental tacit admission that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, for theocracy, their leader is sure going around downplaying all of the theocratic elements. For an ethno-state, the leader's sure going around downplaying all the all the white supremacist elements. Like, if you're going to make these claims, you need proof, right? You just need evidence. But at the end of the day, the people who say this shit are just xenophobes. They're just looking for a reason to hate on Russia, and that's it. And they're just choosing the thing that they hate and then accusing Russia of it with literally no evidence whatsoever. So it's just emotional. It's just kind of an emotional hysteria. CH writes, NATO declaring war on China. Trudeau promising more to Nazis. I mean, NATO didn't declare war on China. I mean, but they are pivoting to Southeast Asia. Like, that's what they're doing. Yeah, XD, Collective West screeches over one hospital in Kiev while 186k Palestinians are slaughtered and they don't care. Yeah. CH, India is actually enabling Russia more than China. They get away with it too, though. Good for them. Well, I mean, the thing that has enabled the relationship between Russia and India is Russia getting pushed out of NATO and getting pushed away. Yeah, hold on. Somebody said something here. Wolf Warrior diplomacy refers to that recent Chinese action movie. Right, because that's how Americans think about culture, right? Oh, an action movie. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna move on. Good to talk to you guys in the chat. But I do have some news articles. Let's start with something hilarious. I think that we should really talk about the fact that from the Rolling Stone, Heritage Foundation exec threatens gay furry hackers in unhinged texts. A newly released log of messages shows a director at the think tank spewing insults after a data breach. Self-described gay furry hackers breached the Heritage Foundation in a cyber attack on July 2nd, and on Tuesday released 2 gigabytes of the conservative think tank's internal data. Now, an executive director at the influential organization is so hopping mad that he might as well invest in a kangaroo costume. The hacktivist collective SiegeSec has been engaged in a campaign called Up Trans Rights, in which it targets government websites with the aim of disrupting efforts to enact or enforce anti-trans or anti-abortion laws. Heritage Foundation was selected due to its Project 2025 plans, seen as a blueprint for Donald Trump to reshape the U.S. with sweeping far-right reforms, should he win another term as president. SiegeSec told Cyberscoop on Tuesday. Group member Vio informed the outlet that they aimed to provide transparency to the public regarding who exactly is supporting Heritage, and that the leaked data includes full names, email addresses, passwords, and usernames of individuals linked to the nonprofit. This material, as the Daily Dot reported, appears to have come from the Daily Signal, Heritage media and commentary site, which lists one Mike Howell as an investigative columnist. The former Trump administration official in the Department of Homeland Security is also the executive director of Heritage's Oversight Project, an initiative focused on border security, elections, and countering the influence of the Communist Party of China. It was Howell who contacted SiegeSec in the wake of the breach to get answers about their motivations, and as he continued to message Vio, his texts grew more unhinged and threatening. After declining to talk with Howell by phone, Vio described what it was that they and their hacker furry comrades sought to accomplish. "We want to make a message and shine light on who exactly supports the Heritage Foundation," they wrote. "We don't want anything more than that, not money and not fame. We're strongly against Project 2025 and everything the Heritage Foundation stands for." Howell seems stunned by the explanation. "That's why you hacked us?" he replied. "Just for that?" Ooh, once the full chat log was released by CSEC. Oh, dude, I'm for sure going to read this. Hold on, let me finish this article, and then I'm going to read the whole chat log. No, they're going to do it here, so I'm just going to do it. Yeah, here we go. Okay, this is it. This is great. Little bit of acting. You guys get to see my acting chops right now. This is going to be good. I'm so looking forward to this. "This is Mike Howell of the Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project. I'd like to chat. Would you be willing to have a call or some other means of communication?" "Hello. Unfortunately, I'm not able to call. I can only stick to text communication if you have another platform you'd prefer. I'm open to adapting how I can." "This platform is fine. What is it that you are seeking or threatening?" "We want to make a message and shine light on who exactly supports the Heritage Foundation. We don't want anything more than that. Not money, not fame. We're strongly against Project 2025 and everything the Heritage Foundation stands for." "That's why you hacked us? Just for that?" "Yes. It should be obvious. That's all we want, based on our history as a hacktivist group. We don't seek money." Okay, listen to me closely. We are in the process of identifying and outing members of your groups. Reputations and lives will be destroyed. Closeted furries will be presented to the world for the degenerate perverts they are. You cannot hide. Your means are minuscule compared to mine. You now can either turn yourself in, or you can cooperate. None of your members will be identified or outed by your organization built on hatred. The only ones deserving of a destroyed life are those within your organization. You want me to cooperate? With what? Spreading misinformation and hatred? We won't turn against our own people. Your own people turned against nature. We will only accelerate the cycle. Nature has no defined set of rules, no authority, just like it should be. Humans can do what they want, and yet you choose to support an organization to harm innocent people. Why? How can you justify this to yourself, knowing you're threatening the rights and lives of other human lives? The people you hate could be anyone, your friend, your mom, your sibling. God created nature, and nature's laws are vicious. It is why you have to put on a perverted animal costume to satisfy your sexual deviances. It's why you are forced to hide like a coward. You violated our rights and broke the law. You have no standing to discuss such matters. The rights your organization violates will be 10 times worse than any crime I've committed. You do not follow God if you use religion as a crutch to hate people. While I hide behind a screen to fight for my rights, you hide behind religion to attack the rights of others. Would you like to meet virtually or send an emissary to meet in person? I would like to be left alone without my rights being threatened. Are you aware that you won't be able to wear a furry tiger costume when you're getting pounded in the ass in federal prison I put you in next year? Such unprofessional language from an executive director. Would you mind if I shared this? Please share widely. I hope the word spreads as fast as the STDs do I put in your degenerate furry community. Meow. Bestiality is a weird sin. It shows you've gone a few clicks too far in trying to satiate your deviant appetite. What's your opinion on vor? My advice is that you get out of Mummy's basement, iron your shirt, buy a girl a drink, and ask her out instead of Googling new deviances for you to fixate on. Be right back. I'm writing a post about you. Would you like me to immediately post your docs publicly or tease it a little for a while? Whatever you prefer. I'm tired with the FBI issuing a 2702 order on your social media. You aren't that sneaky for your line of work. Screenshot of our Bitcoin wallet's transactions. Oh my god, you learned how to look up the public history of my Bitcoin address. Good job, pal. I'm proud of you. Dude, this statement here, I hope the word spreads as fast as the STDs do in your degenerate furry community. Yikes. 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 There's something to clip, eh? Hey, if you like that. This is the kind of hard-hitting content we look into here at the Canadian Commie. If you enjoyed that, you can come on down to thecanadiancommie.com. We live stream 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Come on down, join the community. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks. Dude, that's... Like, I can't imagine caring. Like, I can't imagine caring at all. But it remains to be seen whether these hackers, who last year managed to breach NATO systems, as well as a major U.S. nuclear lab, that they demanded begin research on creating in real life catgirls, will truly disappear into the shadows. Like an empowering fursona, hacking can be an identity that's hard to give up. Before he congratulates himself anymore, Howell might want to at least change his passwords. What a story. Like, what a story. Heritage Foundation is just like a bunch of ghouls, so I'm not like condoning furryism or whatever this is, but I think when we want to talk about deviance, right, the real deviance in the conversation is the Heritage Foundation, for sure. Like, for sure. And I don't think it's close. Like, oh no, some people want to put on some, like, furry animal costumes and, like, pretend like they're an animal. You know, because... Did you guys know? Did you guys know that we are actually descended from animals? Did you know that? Did you actually know that we are actually animals? Did you guys know that? And maybe it's the case that people engage in this kind of behavior to help sort of bridge the psychological gap, if you like, between being an upstanding and fine citizen that's supposed to exist in the world as something of an asexual being, and their animal selves, which is primarily a sexual being, and that we have created such a perverse society that if you display any sexuality whatsoever, you are shunned, essentially. And so people feel very scared of it, and so they'll wear an outfit like this in order to shield themselves and get themselves into the position. Well, if I look like an animal, then I can act like an animal, right? Like, I think it's very simple. I think the true deviancy is how we have is how we have created a society that has very much, like, outside of, like, the internet sort of persona of existence where pornography reigns, right? But you go into the real world, well, you can't really be a sexual creature in the real world, right? And that To me, that's the true deviance. Anyway. CH, this dialogue is the best culture war content ever, yeah. Well, and, like, the Heritage Foundation is, like, literally planning on, like, rounding up minority groups and, like, banning gay marriage. Like, all this kind of shit. So, like, who's the real deviance here? Like, where's the real deviancy? Well, I'm going to move on. Here in Toronto, there's a couple of Toronto articles that I really wanted to read. And one of them, I'm going to start with this one, because there's this frustrating trend that I've been calling for like a year now, maybe a little over a year even, where they're going to try to normalize the price increases, right? Price increases happened, in some cases, like 4 times as high as they were previously. And then, so the prices go like this. They go, woo, right up, straight up. And then they're going to dip a little and then plateau. And that's going to be reported on as if it's like this biggest drop, right? I've been saying that for a long time. Well, here's an article. Canada's average rents just saw their biggest drop in 3 years. Oh, wow. The biggest drop in 3 years, right? The biggest drop in 3 years would mean literally any drop at all, right? If you go up 100% and then go down 1%, you can say that's the biggest drop in 3 years. Right? So what they're trying to do is normalize the new position that we're at and just make sure that everybody accepts it. Yeah, it makes sense that when you go out and buy some bacon and eggs, it costs you $30 now. Right? That makes sense now. That's normal. It's normal that when you go to a restaurant and buy something that used to cost you $10, that now it costs you $30. That makes sense. Right? Normal. And in fact, those prices are coming down. We just saw the biggest price drop in 3 years, you guys. Right? So Canada's average rents just saw their biggest drop in 3 years. Rent growth has stalled overall in recent months in Canada, with some of the country's most expensive cities seeing annual declines in asking rents, while other rental markets continue to see prices soar. The latest rent report from urbanization and rentals.ca for June shows the average rents across all property types fell, 0.8%. From May, down to an average of $2,185. The report noted that this 0.8% was the biggest month-to-month decline in rents since early 2001, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and marks a reversal of seasonal trends that usually see rents rising this time of year. June's annual increase of 7% is also the slowest yearly growth rate in rents in the past 13 months, according to rentals.ca and Urbanization's tracking. Recent months have shown a general cooling in the rental market, a marked contrast from the past years of soaring rent tied to growing competition for units and a general lack of supply. Rents have been effectively flat over the past 3 months, the report said, rising just 0.2% on a national basis between March and June. Zooming in on particular cities and provinces tells a different story, however. Average asking rents for condos and purpose-built rental apartments in Toronto fell 3% to a 22-month low of $2,715, the report stated. Vancouver rents in the same category are still holding above $3,000 per month after rising 1.1% on a monthly basis, but declined 8% year over year. Rents have declined annually in the last 5 months in Toronto and the past 7 months in Vancouver. Yes, a whopping 0.8%. Rents in Montreal were up 4.3% annually in June, edging out Calgary's 4.2% growth. Both cities reported average asking rents of just over $2,000 last month. On a provincial basis, both Ontario and Quebec saw month-to-month decreases in rent, while British Columbia saw flat growth, the report said. The story is different in many parts of the prairies in Atlantic Canada. Edmonton was the leader for apartment rent growth among Canada's 6 largest cities for a 6th consecutive month, the report said. Average asking rents rose 14.3% to an average of 1,564 in June, a figure that still places the Albertan capital near the bottom of Urbanization and Rental.ca's listing of 25 Canadian rental markets. Regina saw an even larger jump at 22% annually, followed by Quebec City at 19% and Saskatoon at 17%. Average asking rents hits range between 1,371 and 1,640 for these cities. Experts who spoke to Global News recently said that there are signs that rampant rental growth is set to stabilize in Canada, particularly in the country's most expensive rental markets. What have I been saying, right? They're going to stabilize this price point and then normalize it. And be like, yeah, this is what it is. This is it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It makes sense that it's 70% of a minimum wage earner's income. That makes sense. Just logical. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, it was capped out at 4%. So maybe we should have a fucking Maoist revolution. J-Darjin economist Randall Bartlett explained that as renters are priced out of cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the exodus towards more affordable pastures sends them to relatively doing the heavy lifting in this sentence, affordable markets like Alberta, where rents soar as competition intensifies for units. He said that with the federal government's plan to ease the flow of non-permanent residents into Canada, alongside efforts to build up the available renting supply, the pressure on rents should abate in the months ahead. What a bunch of fucking losers these guys are. What a bunch of fucking total losers. Inverted Mystic over on Twitch, good to see you. It'll drop like 80%, but they don't report that it's up like 200%. Exactly. Who can afford a condo? You don't know how good you have it. 0.8% is huge if you don't know math, buddy. It was always this expensive. Okay, I don't know if I understand your comment. Stop the press. Just 2.5K a month. That's pocket change. That's not pocket change for me. That would be a disaster for me. From the Toronto Star, right the same vein. Toronto condo sales are tanking, but asking prices aren't budging. Here's why. Condominium sales in downtown Toronto have tanked, but prices have barely budged, thanks to over-leveraged sellers refusing to take a financial hit by listing their units for tens of thousands of dollars below what they bought it for. In June, condo sales fell by a whopping 29% year over year, but prices only declined by 0.9%, according to data from the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. This has led to more inventory on the market, with new listings up more than 12% year over year, giving buyers a bounty of options to choose from. Nearly half of the condos in the markets have been listed for 30 days or more, an increase from the typical 18 days, indicating that sellers aren't meeting buyers' expectations, experts say. If you haven't sold in the first 35 to 40 days, the market is telling you they don't agree with where you've priced your property, said Tom Story, sales representative with Royal LePage Signature Realty. You then need to decide if you take it off the market or relist with a more reasonable price. Only then will we see downward pressure on prices. Sellers would rather cancel listings. You have sellers who are not participating in the price adjustment that's required, pegging their prices too high, said Tim Sirianos, principal broker and owner of Remax Ultimate Realty. And then indecisive buyers who have no real urgency to pull the trigger on making a decision. Sellers don't want to offload their unit at a loss, Sirianos said. And for many, they can't take the financial hit, leading to a lot of cancellations of units, who will relist when market activity ramps up again. Right? So just people hoarding properties, just basically sitting on properties that they bought with the hope that they would turn a profit. Right? Like, if you do this with movie tickets, you're a scalper. If you do this with Xboxes, you're a scalper. Shoes, scalper. Toys, scalper. Lego sets, scalper. Do it with a house, you're an investor. Pandemic buyers won't sell for a loss. Buyers who bought in the pandemic price peak since 2020 and 2022 have now seen the value of their unit drop. Since the February 2022 price peak, Toronto condo prices have fallen around $60,000, and sellers aren't willing to drop prices by that much, said Jared Armstrong, a sales representative at Armstrong Team. Many buyers during this period were also investors looking to cash in on the market. Currently, 45.5% of condo units for sale are vacant, and 21.7% are tenanted, with 31.1% owner-occupied, said Story. So, I'm kind of glazing over that, but I really think that's important to understand. According to this fellow, 45.5% of condo units for sale are vacant. We should just take these. I don't care. Like, I don't care about these stupid little investors and their stupid little game, their little scalping game that they're playing, where they're withholding properties up to 45.5% of properties. Like, it's so very obvious that what's happened is rich psychopaths are hoarding housing in order to keep people homeless for money. Like, that's what's happening. I don't know why we should tolerate that. I don't know why we should care. Oh no, if you do that, they'll lose money. Good, I hope they go bankrupt. I hope they have to sell all their assets at like pennies on the dollar. I hope that they lose a lot of money. Right? I hope, and oh my goodness, that's the worst thing that could possibly happen to them. Right? I haven't even talked about doing what Mao did. Right? I'm just talking about them losing money. Which I hope they do. I hope that we read article after article on this channel of them crying about how much money they lost. Like, withholding housing from people, forcing people into homelessness, forcing people to, like, rent at a rate of just, like, this ungodly amount where people are, like, I literally know people who are living in situations where it's, like, them and 4 other people. I know people who, like, have a room, like the room that I am currently in, and it's just broken up with curtains so that everybody has, like, a little bit of privacy, and that's the living situation that they're in. Like, fuck you. I hope you go bankrupt. I hope that you lose a shit ton of money. I hope that all of your investments bottom out. I hope that the whole fucking economy tanks, and I hope that you cry as loud as possible about it in public so I can laugh at you and make fun of you. Inverted Mystic. I don't want to do what Mao did. I want them to be alive because it's absolute cinema. I like it. Absolute cinema. Margaret Mansell. Yep. Many of them are from money laundering, which goes unreported because we aren't cross-referencing with existent financial fraud data. That's another part of it. I've reported on that. I don't have those articles right in front of me right now, but, like, I've reported on the financial fraud that happens and the money laundering that happens through our housing market, right? And there just comes a point where it's like, it seems like it's intentional, right? It just seems like it's on purpose. Tenanted condos are very difficult to sell right now, unless priced excessively low, said Story. And the buyer for that must be an end user to ask the tenant to leave the unit. That poses another hurdle, as many end users for condos are typically first-time home. Are we just, like, not going to report? Like, literally, he said, hold on. 45.5% of condo units are for sale are vacant. 21.7% are tenanted, with 31% owner-occupied, said Story. It can indicate a majority of units for sale are most likely investor-owned. And then we just glaze right over that, and then we have a whole paragraph about why renters are bad. Get fucked. Get totally fucked. A vicious feedback loop is taking place with the downtown's condo market, which is home to mostly small units that are largely investor-owned. Here we go. Let's talk about the investors. Who are these investors? Let's start naming names, giving addresses. However, fewer investors are in the market buying these small units to rent out, and there aren't many end users interested in pricey bachelor or one-bedroom units. Yes, it's shocking to see some of these units, by the way. Like, some of these units are smaller than the space that I'm in right now. Like, it's actually really disgraceful. Very few of these small units are selling, and many of the buyers can't drop prices. Like, this is what they're talking about when they're talking about building more units. Let's build a bunch of coffins and charge $3,000 a month for people to sleep in coffins. On top of that, downtown's allure is fading as people work remotely. Right now, it's downtown that's really problematic, said Armstrong. You have 20% vacancy rate in commercial real estate and office space. There's a large reduction of interest in people wanting to live downtown. Yeah, if you walk downtown, in downtown Toronto, the solution that Toronto has put forward to its homelessness crisis is to make the city as shitty as possible. To ensure that there isn't any place to sit down, any place that a homeless person can like nestle into to get away from the elements a little bit. They literally cover it in spikes. So the whole place is inhospitable. It's like as if Bowser from Super Mario Brother designed the city. It's just absolutely bullshit. Armed with Opinions writes, I tip my landlord 50% at the end of the month. I hope it's the tip of a bayonet. 15% is generous. I'd go 100%. Kevin writes, Biden just introduced the president of Ukraine as President Putin. Joe. Joe. Dude, I love watching everybody else just be like, oh, he's so demented and he's out of his mind. It's like, yeah, dude, he's old. Like, he's old. He's old. I would prefer to talk about his insane genocidal policies and how he's always been like an insane, unhinged lunatic. It's just like obvious now that he's like literally demented, you know? Like, he's always been demented. Now he's just literally demented. Long Defiant writes, eventually we need to see seller capitulation or a bailout. There's 27 empty houses in the U.S. for every homeless person. Yeah, dude, you know what I think we're actually going to see? Right? I think that we're going to see the quote-unquote investors just continue buying properties. And they're just going to continue hoovering them up because they don't give a shit if people are homeless. And these investors are just going to start treating the housing market like it's a currency. Right? Just like a game of Monopoly, you just trade houses with one another. Right? You trade properties with one another. Right? It's the same. They just view it as a currency. And they don't give a shit if people are living in these places. And so they'll just continue buying up more properties. As more properties are built or get put on the market, they'll just buy up more. And they don't give a fuck. Doesn't matter to them at all. Yeah, their hope is that if they hoard their properties for long enough, the prices will go up again. Honestly, guys, I think it's actually way, way fucking worse than that. I think it's way, way fucking worse than that. That if I'm a billionaire with a B, and a house costs $1 million or $2 million or whatever it costs, right? The concern for a billionaire is, where do I put my money so that my money is safe? Where do I put my money so that my money is safe? Right? I don't want to invest my money in places where my money is going to lose value over time. I want my money to be safe and secure. Right? Well, I'm certainly not going to put it in dollars or U.S. treasuries. Right? That looks like it's tanking. So I think a lot of these guys are just looking at what's going on in the world, and they're basically just saying the best place to keep my money is real estate. And I'll just buy real estate, and that real estate is my money. And then what they do, like, the game isn't I'll buy that and then value will go up and then I will sell it for money. That's not the game that they're playing, right? Maybe some smaller players are playing that game, but that's not the game that they're playing. The game that they're playing is I'll have real estate, and then I'll leverage that real estate against a loan from the bank. Jeff Bezos outright said that this is what he does, right? Like there are big money investor types that have outright said that this is what they do. That they take the properties that they have and they use that as leverage for a loan against the bank. And then they just keep doing that, getting ever larger loans to pay off the previous loan to get access to more money to do what they want, right? And they just keep leveraging and they keep leveraging and they keep leveraging. And when asked, well, how do you actually intend to pay off the loan completely? Like at some point you have to sell the property, right? In order to pay off the loan in its entirety, right? You can't just keep leveraging the property to get ever increasing and larger loans. And you know what the response has actually been? Oh, I'll just die. I'm just going to die. It's fine. So their plan is hoard as much property as possible, rendering huge sections of the populace homeless and desperate and poor, keeping people in a pattern of renting, ensuring that nobody can actually get access to housing. Hoard as much property as you can. Turn around to the banks, leverage the properties and the assets that you own in order to get access to money to be able to do what you want to do out in the world. And then when it comes time to pay off that loan, just leverage the properties and the assets that you have in order to garner a larger loan to pay off the original loan, and then use the surplus in order to go do the thing that you wanted to do. And then just keep doing that until you die. And how do we know that that's what they're doing? Because they've said so. And for the privilege of them getting on that little cyclical treadmill of using assets to get loans from banks until the day they die, we get poverty, homelessness, we get people who have worked their entire lives to try to get a house being told to go fuck themselves. I don't know why we should tolerate it. I don't know why, but what rule of nature says that this should be permissible? Yep, the best place to keep money is physical assets. So says Inverted Mystic. So they'll buy gold houses and cars and rent out the houses and cars and just sit on the shiny rock. No, they don't even rent out the houses. Like, that's the other side of it. Like, to them, the part of renting the house is too burdensome. It interrupts the flow of the scam, right? That you have to hire a property management company and you have to have this other asset and all this. Forget it. I don't care about having a renter. I don't care about any of that. I'm just going to have that empty asset that sits there and is empty, and that's all it is, that I use to leverage to get loans from the bank. That's it. That's the totality of their plan. So it's actually way worse, right? Than the other theory, which I think also does exist, but on a smaller scale. Like, I think that if you have, like, millions of dollars, your plan is to buy up property, wait for housing to go up, turn around and sell at a higher value, right? Buy low, sell high, right? I think that if you're in, like, the lower echelon of the game, that's what you're doing. And then, of course, in that echelon, there's also, like, slumlords. There's just people who buy up a bunch of properties, and then, yes, they do turn around and rent them. And they're slumlords. And you've got a guy that owns 200 properties, and he's just renting them out. And the bank is just completely on board with that. Because, yeah, we can't afford $1,200 a month in property tax, says the bank. But we can afford $1,800 in rent, says the bank. Because the bank's on board with it. Like, the bank wants to do business with the billionaires. They're not interested in us. Right? They've abandoned us a long time ago, which is why the nationalization of the banks is important. Like, that's the number one reason I don't take the NDP seriously, by the way. They're all like standing in front of us being like, we're gonna fight corporate power. How? Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna raise taxes 2% over 30 years. So you're liberals. Fuck off. Nationalize the banks. At this stage in my life, the only political movement that I will pay any attention to at all, like literally, I won't even listen to you. If a politician stands in front of me and says, hey, I'd like you to vote for me, and I say, are you going to nationalize the banks? And they say, well, I'm out. I'm going to walk away. I'm not even going to listen to them. I don't care what they have to say. They're just a capitalist shill trying to convince me to allow the system of capital to continue controlling our society. Bank nationalization. Nothing else. Like, literally, that's my entry point. I'm not even entering the conversation unless you are nationalizing the banks. So, like, there's zero reason why I should trust the NDP, because they're standing there with solutions that are non-solutions. Their solutions are literally just liberalism. Literally just, what we're going to do is we're going to do a 2.3% tax over 30 years that will be offset because we'll buy assets for them. The way that Justin Trudeau raised a 1% tax on corporate power and then turned around and bought, like, Galen Weston a bunch of fridges. It, like, literally offset the tax. So he literally taxed him to buy him assets. It's like, shut up. Like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to watch these frauds, these just total political losers, con everybody into going along with this obvious fraudulent game, and we're all just going along with it. That's the part about it that's so fucking wild. We're all just going along with it. Just being like, well, I guess the only solution is to let the billionaires remain as billionaires and tax them at 2.3% over 50 years. We're dumb. Nationalize the banks, raise the capital gains tax to 130%, raise the corporate tax rate over earnings over $1 million to 200%. Like, tax these people out of existence. They are losers. They suck. They are terrible. They are awful. Just take a look at the legislation that they're getting behind. Just take a look at the Project 2025. Just take a look at this shit. Bank nationalization. If you're not saying bank nationalization, you are an unserious person who works for capitalists. And I'm completely disinterested in what you have to say. Long Defiant writes, fiat currency loses value over time, real estate increases over time, use fiat loans to buy real stuff, and eventually the loan is worthless. Well, and eventually you just die. Right? Like, this is the thing that I think more and more people are actually starting to recognize and realize, is that, like, the people who are pulling these cons understand what they're doing. They understand that what they're doing is destroying the entire system because they're not going to have to deal with the consequences. They know that they're just going to die, right? And so they're fine with that. They're fine with destroying everything around them because they don't give a fuck about us. Like, they don't care at all. Like, I've said it over and over and over again. Like, future generations, like 200 years from now, people will look back on this period of time with the genuine question, how did this society convince itself to abandon its own children? How did it convince itself to abandon its own children? Like, what are you talking about student loans? Like, what are you talking about? Like you want to saddle an entire generation of people with student debt so that they can have access to higher education, which is necessary to advance your society and advance your culture? What are you fucking talking about? Like, how did this happen? What this objective catastrophe? And then when the kids started pointing it out, they all just got told, you're being spoiled, selfish brats. By people who literally are lifting the ladder up from underneath them. Like, it's just crazy what we're doing. And we just keep doing it. Like, this is a civilization that is absolutely designed to collapse. This is a society that is supposed to collapse. And when it collapses, like the collapse that is coming for our society is going to make the Great Depression look like a baby knocking over Jenga tower. Like, it's going to be like baby's first collapse. Like, we are going to experience, and the biggest part about the collapse that is going to be absolutely ruthless for everyone is that there isn't a single person in any position of power anywhere in the United States or Canada, from literally the mayor of a small town, like the mayor of Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, all the way up to the prime minister or the president of the United States. No one gives a fuck about it. Nobody gives a shit in the entire structure. There's not one judge. There's not one politician. There's not one governor, premier. The prime minister's office doesn't give a fuck. Nobody cares. When the collapse happens, all of these politicians are going to scoop up as much as they can possibly get their hands on and fucking leave. And look at us and say, well, you deal with it. Bye. Transylvanian writes, they don't think it will collapse. Societies throughout history managed to exist for hundreds of years with a majority of their population in debt bondage to a small elite. It was called feudalism. Yeah? Peanut Butter Beatrice writes, is there any culture in history that has made war on its own youth and survived? Transylvanian writes, today's elites are looking back at that and asking themselves, hey, why don't we bring that back? Why can't we have that kind of power? Why can't we have serfs? Yeah, isn't that what's happening right now? I mean, yeah, these are fair observations. These are fair observations. And so it just comes to a point where I begin to ask, like, why do we even bother looking at any of these politicians? Like, why should we listen to Jagmeet Singh? Why should we listen to Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre? Like, why should we listen at anybody who's trying to stand in front of us and say, yeah, the system of capital, we need to maintain the power of the capitalists? No. Like, absolutely not. Like, abso-fucking-lutely not. Meanwhile, in an actual civilization that actually is governed, from The Guardian, China building 2/3 of world's wind and solar projects. The country is on track to reach 1,200 gigawatts of installed wind and solar capacity by the end of 2024, 6 years ahead of Beijing's target. The amount of wind and solar power under construction in China is now nearly twice as much as the rest of the world combined, a report has found. Research published on Thursday by Global Energy Monitor, an NGO, found that China has 180 gigawatts of utility-scale solar power under construction and 15 gigawatts of wind power. That brings the total of wind and solar power under construction to 339 gigawatts, well ahead of the 40 gigawatts under construction in the United States. The researchers only looked at solar farms with a capacity of 20 milliwatts or more, which feed directly into the grid. That means that the total volume of solar power in China could be much higher. A small-scale solar farm account for about 40% of China's solar capacity. The findings underscore China's leading position in global renewable energy at a time when the U.S. is increasingly worried about Chinese overcapacity and dumping, particularly in the solar industry. Yeah, of course the U.S. is worried about that because the U.S. cares about who makes the money. China doesn't give a fuck about that. They don't care about that at all. Like, they're going to continue erecting capitalist structures until the capitalists no longer can do it for a profit, and then the Chinese state is just going to do it. Right? They're going to seize those factories. They're going to seize all of the stuff that the capitalists built in order to squeeze as much profit out of it as they could. And then they're going to take control of that, and they're going to continue manufacturing. Why? Because they know it's just good to have them. Right? That they don't give a fuck about this weird, creepy little game of counting shekels. Like, they don't give a fuck about this. They don't care about this odd little game of shifting pennies around. And like, well, if we slit the throats of our children, we'll make an extra nickel. They don't care. Right? They've looked at the West and gone, wow, these guys really seem to care about invisible pieces of paper we print. So let's just let them do that until they exhaust themselves. And then all of the factories and all of the research and all of the manufacturing and all of the training and all the stuff that they did for us in order to achieve that, we'll just take that over and keep doing it. And when people say, well, don't you know that you're not going to be able to make a profit? They'll just be like, the panels are the profit. The profit is having the solar panel. That's what the profit is. Like, I don't understand how that's not seen. I don't understand how capitalists just literally have disconnected so thoroughly from a material reality that they don't understand that the profit isn't the fake little dollars that we're all printing. The profit is the panel. The profit is having more capacity so that you can grow other sectors into it. Like, that's the reason why we're so dumb about this. That we don't understand that the asset is what's important. Like, and the only time we get into that mindset of like, well, the asset is important is so that we can leverage it for a loan. Yeah, money's the only thing that matters. Oh, by the way, Contin, I wanted to go back on this. Contin, you wrote in big capital letters, LOL, Bowser designed the city. Yeah, it's true, dude. It's how the city of Toronto is designed. Like, you walk around this place, and like you walk around like the boroughs and like the suburbs, and it's like well treed and everything looks fine, right? And that looks like the Mushroom Kingdom, right? You go to the downtown core, dude. It's like they gave Bowser a blueprint, and or like a construction table, and we're like, hey, you build the city. Bum 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 bum. Look at this chart. Almost 2/3 of global wind and solar projects under construction are in China. Like, look at how pathetic this is. The United States has 40.1 gigawatts, which there's a brown box, or sorry, a gray box in the bottom right-hand corner here, for those of you who are just listening, that says others. And the others category is actually twice as large as the United States. That's how much of a laggard the United States is on this future technology and on this future economy that must be built, by the way. Like, this economy must be built. Like, and you know why it must be built? Because we run out of oil. Did you guys know? Like, forget about climate change, right? The propaganda here in the West against climate change has been more or less successful. There's at least half of the society that's too dim-witted to get a hold of it, and they just refuse to go along with it. So forget about climate change. Did you know that oil is a non-renewable resource that we... Hold on. I know. It'll be tough. It'll be tough for you to grab hold to and really respect and understand. One of the defining characteristics of non-renewable resources is that they run out and they can't be renewed. Did you know that? So we must build a new power system. It is an absolute imperative for any amount of future planning, for future generations at all, for us to build a new power grid that is not based off of fossil fuels simply because we run out of the shit. We just run out of it. Turbo Jerko coming in, really proving the namesake. Do you have a job? I have 2 jobs. I'm actually doing pretty well, my man. Like, I could be doing better, obviously. Yeah, thanks, bud. I know that you only respect people if they have a job. I get that. If I was a homeless man, you just walk by me, right? It's the reason you ask that question. And now you're going to ask the question, what is it that I do? So that you can gauge on your social strata how much respect you should have for me, right? That if I was a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, you'd be like, oh, well, here's a serious guy. Or if I was like a professor or something, you'd be like, oh, yeah, a serious guy. But if I'm a garbage man or like a retail worker, right? Retail workers have it the worst. Oh, you're distributing goods into the society? Despicable. Minimum wage. Terrible. We should not be defining the character of people based on the job that they have. Like, there are a lot of really despicable doctors and lawyers and engineers. Turbo Jerko continues, nope, if you couldn't work, I'd pay for you. Well, now I feel bad, Turbo Jerko. Now I feel bad. You made me feel bad, Turbo Jerko. So you're still the bad guy. I'm not a capitalist, and I'm a pipe fitter. Yeah, good for you, bud. Good for you. I'm just like... I'm super traumatized. Because, like, my life has been a series of me attempting to embark on a path and then having that bottom out through forces that are totally out of my control. And basically my life resetting and going back to zero. And that's happened to me at least 6 times. 6? Yeah, 6 times. That I have embarked on a new journey and a new path and a new trajectory where I've built something, and basically right when it gets stable, it bottoms out and I'm back to zero. COVID was an especially bad one. COVID was an especially bad reset because not only did I lose my job, I also lost my relationship. And so it was like literally back to zero. And through that whole period of time, I was basically called a loser. Right? I've essentially been declared a loser by this society that essentially insists that the winner of the society are ruthless psychopaths like Kevin O'Leary. So it's been pretty incredible to experience this society that just betrays its citizens as fast as possible. Turbo Jerko continues. Well, Turbo Jerko, you're being really kind to me. I came to ask you with good faith, not trying to break your balls. I want to know, why are mega communists Nazis? You are not a loser, I'm sure of it. Well, I just did a video about that very thing, Turbo Jerko. And the reason why I say that mega communists are Nazis is because they say so. You're going to find that, like, a lot of the time when you talk to me, when I make statements that are like, I don't know, that sounds odd or it sounds strange, the answer I'm going to give you is, well, they say so, right? That if you actually go and look at their documentation, and you actually look at what they say, and you look at what they're talking about, you see that, oh, they just say so, right? I'll give you the clear example, and I point this out in the video that I made of these guys, right? The rise of mega communism. So here you go. One of the prominent figures within the mega communist community is this fellow, No, it does more than mentions Nazis, my man. So, I understand why people struggle with this, because it's written in an obtuse way to be misunderstood on purpose. Carl. Okay. Enter Carl Schmitt's theory of the partisan. Right? So this is infrared, this is Has setting the foundation for his theory. Like, he makes the claim that the left-right dichotomy doesn't exist, that the political spectrum doesn't exist. It's unhinged and ranting and rambling, but sure. And so he creates a new theory, right? And this new theory begins with Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt's theory of the partisan. Okay. Here's Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt was a German jurist, political theorist, geopolitician, and prominent member of the Nazi Party. You can read about him. He's an extremely well-established Nazi. He wrote In 1962, Schmitt gave lectures in Francoist Spain, another fascist buddy of his, two of which resulted in the publication the next year, The Theory of the Partisan, in which he characterized the Spanish Civil War as a war of national liberation against international communism. So the guy's a Nazi, right? Creating a theory of the partisan that now this guy, Adam Tahir is his name, has adopted for his own theory. When you read the article, did you notice that he doesn't really cite Karl Marx? Right? Like, he'll like briefly mention Marx. He does so like, what, 8 times? A common faux Marxist analysis prevailing amongst liberal intentionality. But usually when he cites these Marxist things, he inverts what Marx actually said. Like, I don't, as a Marxist, I don't believe that this guy actually has read Marx. Like, I think that maybe he has glanced over the Communist Manifesto. And then if you go to the bottom, right at the end, right, of this big, long, rambling diatribe, here's this statement. Our faith lies with the people alone, and so mega-communists, now make it their goal to go down to the people and fight alongside them in a common, partisan struggle against the ruling class. Partisan struggle. Where does that come from? Literal Nazi. No. Like, you're trying to make the claim that there is a good way to drink sulfuric acid. No, it's fine that it came from a Nazi. No, it's totally fine that it came from a Nazi. It just needs to be applied. Nope. You know, Adolf Hitler had some good ideas, you know. Nope. No, a big part about reading is understanding what you've read. And this guy does not understand Marx. Like, full stop. Like, full stop. There is a 0% chance that this man understands Karl Marx and understands communism. Like, absolutely 0%. Here's an argument that he makes in this article. Let me see if I can find it right away. It'd be great if I could, but it's such a rambling, just absolute nonsense And he's like purposefully obtuse on purpose because he knows that he's a Nazi, and so he's trying to obfuscate that. And he basically explicitly states it. Like one of the most I can actually I know a buzzword that I can hit, or the word that I can hit. I'm definitely spelling this wrong. Here you go. Like here he explicitly states it. Hence, and he loves to use the R word, which is just like a sign of his childishness, of woke political theory who critique bourgeois formalism and universalism on account of neglecting differences completely misses the point. We are the people, are you sure? What about fat, trans, indigenous women? We the people and the universal statehood implicit in it is a purported intention, a conceit. It does not claim to actually know or represent every individual person. It is the purport of a state which seeks to act as a universal people, and thus an inherently abstracted form of the people. The people in the institutional purport of their sovereignty, i.e., if a state will act as the people, it can only do so as a pure form, which knows no distinction in content, i.e., between people. So if you're a straight white man, the state represents you. But if you are a fat, trans, indigenous woman, it does not. Right? He just explicitly says it. That if you are a fat, trans, indigenous woman, the state does not represent you. What does the state represent then? Oh, well, the universal state. Yeah, straight white men. Right? Because it's not representing fat people, it's not representing trans people, it's not representing indigenous people, and it's not representing women. So who does it represent? Oh, the institutional purport of their sovereignty. He's describing the patriarchy. He's describing how straight white men historically have dominated minority groups and women and queer people for their own benefit, and that we all just should subordinate ourselves to their quote-unquote universal, that they will act as a universal people on our behalf. Right? And to say otherwise is a conceit. So if women or indigenous people or trans people would like to be considered as equals or have their voice heard in the society at the same level as straight white men, that's a conceit. He's just a Nazi. He's literally saying out loud in front of you that there are subhumans. There are people here and there are people here. No, it's beyond good optics. He is a Nazi. And he's a Nazi who, like Nazis have done historically in the past, is co-opting communist and socialist language in order to further their own agenda, like Adolf Hitler did. That's exactly what Adolf Hitler did. Which is why you have total losers in the discourse today standing around saying, Nazis were socialist. It's in the name. It's in the name. Because they're ahistorical morons who have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. As if mass murdering racists and rapists won't also be just liars. So, has calling himself a communist while citing Nazis, using Nazism as a backbone of his philosophy, makes him a fraudulent liar of the highest possible level. He is not a communist. He is not interested in communism. He is interested in convincing you that he's interested in communism so that he can use it as a Trojan horse for his naked and open Nazism that he openly talks about. The only reason he has gotten away with it to this point is because his writing is so purposefully obtuse and difficult to parse through intentionally so that he can obfuscate what his actual aim is. So that when he achieves his Nazi goals, he can point at it and see, look, I was always a Nazi. Here's my Nazi credentials and my Nazi credibility. Sure pulled the wool over the eyes of those commies. Just like Nazis always have throughout history. I don't know, dude. I feel like you're saying I should have added this to my video. I feel like pointing out that he's rooting his theory and his philosophy in Nazism is good enough. Like, I'm glad that it brought you in here and I could explain this whole other side of things and like the longer part of it, sure. But I gotta really tell you, my man. Like, love in my heart when I say it. I find it a bit concerning that you see a guy who's basically citing and quoting a Nazi, and you're thinking anything other than, oh, this guy's a Nazi. Like, everything the Nazis wrote, and anyone who has ever pulled things from Nazis in order to support their own theory, should be thrown in the waste bin of history and thrown out the door. If you look at Adolf Hitler and said, well, you know, Hitler did some good things, bye-bye. Bye. Not interested in your perspective. Not interested in what you're having to say. I am not willing to open the door to Nazis any more than I am willing to open the door to a fucking vampire. Dracula did some good things, though, you know. Yeah, no. Door stays firmly shut. Garlic. Cross. No Nazis. 0%. Not 0.1%. 0%. Turbo Jerko says, well, he seems like a bigoted guy that talks about communist economics. But this is the thing that's important, I think, Turbo Jerko, is that he doesn't know anything about communism. I think that's really what's important. Yeah, let's keep talking about it. Yesterday I did a big read-through of this very thing, so this is very fresh in my mind. And I'm actually really happy to see that this has inspired somebody to come forward and ask questions. But I think, so I'm happy that you're here. And if you want more info, keep asking questions. My suggestion to you is to stop listening to a guy like Haz, who is illiterate, who has not read Marx, and if he has read Marx, he has intentionally misunderstood it. He doesn't know what he's talking about, especially if he thinks that he can square communism with Nazism, which you can't. They're ideological opposites of one another. Nowhere in any communist diatribe is there anybody talking about subhuman races and patriarchy and all of this, except in order to show what it is and show that it should be challenged. Haz doesn't know anything about communist economics because he is illiterate. So, my advice to you, if you're looking for somebody to inform you more about communism, outside of myself, of course, I would direct you to Richard Wolff. I think Richard Wolff with 2 F's is a very strong and powerful voice in the conversation. he's a PhD professor of economics at I forget what university he's at right now, but he was trained at Stanford. He was trained at Harvard. He very famously points out that the entire time that he was receiving his economics education at these prestigious elite institutions, he was never once told to read Marx, which is why so much of our economics is just rooted in illiteracy, and why people like Has have been permitted into the door, because people have no idea what communism is or what Marxism is in the first place. And so anybody who speaks with just any kind of authority, although this kind of stuff, like, we should be able to see through guys like this right away. Like, anybody who writes like this, like, this isn't just long-winded, it's intentionally obtuse. Like, I'm just going to pick a random section. Let's pick a random section. Information has become the most important battle space of modern warfare. Having been rooted out of its position in both armed combat and civil society, the partisan revolutionary has retreated into information warfare. Information warfare is the final form of modern warfare, because it is the site within which universal modern form itself undergoes eminent constantation. In all hitherto spaces of warfare, the modern state could take for granted a basic distinction between the sphere of its own exercise of will, operational capabilities, and identity, and the sphere of criminality outside of it. It's meaningless. It's just drivel. Right? Like, if you want to read about information warfare, read Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky. Right? Which is dry, but it makes sense. This is just nonsense. And to, like, parse it, you have to, like... It has its own internal logic. That to parse it, you have to kind of get on board a thought train that is disassociated. I know about all the workers and the economy stuff. I know Wolf. I'm more interested in this sly, tricky stuff. The bad faith tricksters. Well, Has is interesting because it's like, is he a bad faith actor or is he just demented? Right? Like, when I take a look at the patriotic socialist movement generally, that's Midwestern Marx, Caleb Maupin. When I take a look at these guys, like, I think Eddie, Midwestern Marx, is the best example of this. Because I think Eddie is well read. I think that he has read communism, read the Communist Manifesto and Capital. I think he has read Engels, right? I think he has read Parenti. I'd say that like 90% of the time, whenever this guy talks, I'm like, absolutely, Eddie, you're nailing it. Like, you got it. You understand what's going on for sure. But the hard truth about Eddie is that he is a Midwesterner. He was born in a Midwestern community, and he has all of the bigotries that lie therein, right? He inherited all of the same bigotries that I inherited when I was born in a rural community myself. Like, and what he has done is, instead of actually deconstructing his own inherent biases and bigotries, he is attempting to erect a political philosophy that permits him to not deconstruct his racism and his bigotries. That he makes the case that we should put forward class first and foremost. That this is a class war, and so it should be about class, right? And the reason why he makes that statement, which I think there's something to that, class should be within the conversation, absolutely, and often isn't. It's often purposefully excluded, But the reason why he wants it to be exclusively and only about class is because the class distinction is the only thing that matters to him. Because he lives in a patriarchal society. He lives in a society where white straight men experience no hurdles. That all social groups basically open paths and the straight white man walks right down it. And so his statement of we should ignore what people of color, queer people, trans people, women, what they have to say and how that intersects with class, all of that should just be ignored and in fact admonished when they do it. Because what we should be focusing on are the concerns of straight white males, which is exclusively class, right? Like, it's just bigotry. And I think that a guy like Eddie is coming by it kind of honestly. Like, I don't think that he would actually act on it. Like, I don't think he's going to put on the hood and show up at a guy's house, right? But that's what he's inherited. And instead of confronting it, instead of looking himself in the eye and actually sitting down and actually saying, like, oh, shit, yeah, like, women, people of color, and trans people have different issues than I do, and those issues are just as important as my issue. Those issues, in fact, intersect with my issue, and in fact, once I begin to accept the veracity and the truth of their perspectives and their positions, it actually strengthens my case. Because that's the truth. Once you understand that the stories that the queer community and the black community and the Latino community and that women are telling you, once you accept that they are true, you see how they come in and they fit within your own thinking and they actually strengthen your own perspective and your own philosophy. Ignoring them weakens you. And especially when you're ignoring them with this kind of excuse of we should reach across to the right, all you're kind of really showing is that you're more comfortable hanging out with other bigots than you are hanging out with the subject of their bigotry. And that's really what it comes down to. Ugly non-binary guy 12. Turbo is a payaso. I don't know what that is. Don't listen to him. He's been fine to me. Turbo Jericho says, class, I would say, is what is actually the base and definitely linked with racism. Yeah. Like, Eddie has very recently said, has a new bookshelf, good to see you. Eddie has very recently said that, oh, settler colonialism happened so long ago, right? We don't, why are we focusing on that? Because that's the foundation of your civilization. That's the foundation of your society. You can't just ignore that. Right? You just can't. You cannot ignore that the founding principles of the nation that you live in is settler colonialism. Because what the patriotic socialists are trying to do is they're trying to pick and choose, and they're trying to create a mythology of America in order to move forward along this they're trying to move forward along this patriotic line. They're trying to maintain something of America when there's nothing there to be maintained. And they're doing so by kind of erecting a fiction of America that doesn't really exist. Cody Culp, I don't think you are going to get a bunch of bigots to accept or even try to understand intersectionality, but it would be nice if class consciousness wasn't almost erased in America. That's what Christian nationalism does, God and country nonsense. Well, I think it was the McCarthy period mainly, right? Like you don't, you don't just kind of like casually push out communists and casually push out the class distinction. It was done on purpose. It was done intentionally. Cody Johnson of Some More News recently just did a very interesting take of Ronald Reagan. And when he was discussing Ronald Reagan's stripping away of the education system in America, he outright quotes many intellectuals across America who outright said that we can't let people have free college educations and free university educations because that will raise their consciousness. So the bourgeois is very aware of the of class politics. They're very aware of class politics. And they do everything they can to make sure that we are dumb and illiterate, because they don't want us to have what we think rooted in historical material perspective, right? And and so it's intentionally done. Like it's like whenever I talk about the Christian right in this society, and people ask like, well, where's the Christian left? They were assassinated, right? Well, you think that when Martin Luther King got assassinated and Malcolm X got assassinated, amongst other religious left leaders, you think when Dietrich Bonhoeffer gets hung by the Nazis, that doesn't have a huge chilling effect on the left in religious circles? Like, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. So we have to take more seriously the hard truth that communists were not defeated ideologically in America. They were literally shot and bankrupted. Like, that's straight up what happened to them. So there's a reason why there's this vacuum. There's a reason why we're rebuilding it. Because it was intentionally assaulted and destroyed on purpose by organizations that have $500 billion budgets in order to do so, like the CIA. Sankaris Renault, the Russian Civil War had right and left-wing elements in the coalition. I mean, right and left-wing elements within the left. Like, people accused Lenin of being a right-winger, but like a right-wing communist, right? So it's a bit disingenuous. Like, it's not the same thing. A coalition is the strongest when you reach the most people. I mean, it is a numbers game at some point. But the truth is that if you want a better analogy of why the coalition building that the patriotic socialists are doing is not going to work, you want to take a look at the history of Mao's communists with the KMT. That for a period of time, the KMT are essentially far right. Many of them almost Nazi adjacent. There's like, I think it's like the White Lotus. No, that's wrong. It's not the White Lotus, but anyway, it doesn't matter. And they had an alliance as they fought against imperialists together, and the KMT ultimately betrays the communists, right? Which is historically what happens, that the right betrays the left. And that's essentially what the patriotic socialists are setting themselves up for by doing this quote-unquote coalition building. That they're not actually building coalitions, they're just empowering the far right. And the far right will use them as far as they can get away with, or as far as they need them, and then they'll betray them. And that's what's going to happen, right? And how do I know? Because that's historically what happens. Just so you read history, it's what happens. Oh, that's interesting. More Brookwood Labor College, and I would say I know some Christian left. They locked themselves to bulldozers at Cop City here in Atlanta. Good for them. Good for them, dude. The cop cities that are happening are absolutely the rise of, like, the real rise of fascism is happening in the cop cities. That, like, the next generation of people will be governed and ruled by those cop cities, for sure. Inverted Mystic says, there is right-wing socially and right-wing economically. You could make the argument that Lenin was right-wing compared to, like, us. but like economically, no. Lenin was called right-wing because he was a centralist, because he believed in a strong centralized government. That's why he was called right-wing. That there were people, like anarchists, for example, are super left-wing. Like, they're just like, abolish the state, horizontal government, right? Well, Lenin was straight up just like, that's not going to work. That's not how this is going to go, right? Sankaras continues, you sound like a Calvinist where all Americans are ordained as sinful and all they can do is repent. It's such a cynical perspective. You will never develop a popular mass movement based on this. I think that that's just projection. I don't, like... people are just people, right? Like, they're capable of doing great harm to one another, but it's not as individualist as that. That the best way to understand a people, and the best way to understand people, is by understanding the society that they live in, and understanding the systems that are around them, right? Like, a person who is living in a society where there's not enough food for everybody is going to act dramatically different than a person that lives in a society that has abundance, right? It's and that just should be fundamentally true and understood on the face of it, right? That one of the big things that's going on in our society today is that we have a hyper individualist outlook. Like, everything essentially boils down to the individual. To the point where capitalists are essentially just worshiping themselves, and it's just all about how much money can I make and myself, and as long as I look out for myself, then I don't and pay no attention to anybody else, then somehow that should all work itself out. It's just kind of unserious, right? The core principle for a communist should be opposing finance imperialism, right? Everything else is downstream of that. If someone opposes that, they are my ally, even if they are socially conservative. I mean, sure, but like, if their goal is to subjugate and subordinate a person based on their race or sexual orientation, right? Like, you can't oppose the empire while upholding everything it stands for, right? Like, that's just kind of the hard truth about it. Like, you can say that you are against United States imperialism, right? Right, and Sankaras then says, you can settle that after you get in power. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is that the right wing will use the left until they get in power and then betray them. That's exactly what I just said. Right? That your idea is that the right and the left should come together as allies against the system of finance capital, and then once that's finished, we can settle everything else. It's not accurate to sort of point at the Bolsheviks. Like the Bolsheviks weren't dealing with the same kind of slave society that we have in America. Like, it is different. Like, this is the reason why I'm very suspicious of this line, right? Like, you're fundamentally saying, let's just ignore settler colonialism. And I'm really here to tell you, on a materialist historical analysis, you can't do that. It won't work that way. Yeah, the Tsar subjugated all of Russia. 95% of the people were cattle. Right. 95% of them had the exact same experience. Right? 95% of them had the exact same experience. Well, that's not the case in America. Like, that's not the case for America. Like, that we have groups of people who have been separated and pushed out of the system through the process of settler colonialism. And fundamentally, your argument is we should just ignore them. Well, it's not surprising that they turn around and say, oh, their argument is we should just be ignored. And so when they say we'll settle it after we take power, well, then we expect to just continue being ignored. Because we're being ignored now. Right? That the descendants of black slaves and the institution of black slavery is being ignored. The First Nations genocide, as well as the institutions that come out of that genocide, are just being ignored. The women's rights issues are really just being ignored, right? It evoking this kind of phrase of evoking this idea of, well, we should exclusively and only focus on class issues. Well, don't be too surprised when they say to you, oh, so you're just going to ignore me in favor of sitting with Nazis. So it's unsurprising that they would be suspicious of that and suspicious of your intention. Honestly, Sankaris, like, you seem to know a lot about this guy. I'd be curious to hear your take on why he's citing Nazis as one of his founding principles. So, I've pointed this out in this article. He cites Carl Schmitt's theory of the partisan. This is Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt was a prominent member of the Nazi Party. Oh, okay, so you don't know. So in this article, from Infrared, The Rise of Megacommunism, he says, enter Carl Schmitt's theory of the partisan. This is about 30 or 40% of the way through this very poorly written article. Well, that's Carl Schmitt. His theory of the partisan he wrote after World War II, right? Where during the war he was a prominent member of the Nazi Party. He finishes this article by saying, our faith lies with the people alone, and so mega-communists now make their goal to go down to the people and fight alongside them in a common partisan struggle against the ruling class. That's partisan struggle. Yeah, Sankaris, you should think about that. You should think about that. Right? Like, you should really think about that. Like, I don't know what this Nazi apologetics is about. Like, why am I looking at Nazi apologetics in my chat all of a sudden? And why is it coming from people who are claiming to be communists? Plenty of Marxists have written about the partisan. Who? What are their names? Yeah, then go build socialism with the white man. You have all the guns, all the anger, all the access. And yet, even with overwhelming numbers, the white man fails to build socialism. Yeah. A list of non-communists. Cool. Sorry, dude. Like, I'm reading Marx. I'm reading Lenin. I'm reading Mao. I'm reading Deng Xiaoping, Xi Jinping. Like, I don't know why you want to read a bunch of... Like, Zizek? Are you kidding? Like Heidegger, just because it was a Nazi... So it's Nazi apologetics is what it is. That's all. This is just Nazi apologetics, guys. Then why is his philosophy rooted in Nazism? Heidegger is one of the most influential modern day philosophers. So? Like, why are we including in the backbone of our philosophy Nazis? I still haven't seen a good answer for this. Why are we including in our philosophy? Yeah, communists should be able to read everything, sure. But that's not what we're doing. We're including it in the basis of our the foundation of our philosophy. So again, why should I include in the basis of my philosophy, at the backbone and the foundation of my philosophy, Nazism? Schmidt isn't the backbone of a philosophy. It obviously is. Right here. Our faith lies with the people alone, and so mega communists now make it their goal to go down to the people and fight alongside them in a common partisan struggle against the ruling class. There it is. So again, I'm going to ask the question. I'm gonna ask the question. That's literally Maoism. Embarrassing, dude. Very, very embarrassing for you. Like really, really embarrassing. I'm gonna ask again. Why should I include in my philosophy of thought Nazism? I'm just gonna start banning people. If you're not gonna respond, I'm just gonna start banning people. I have a very strict and strong no-Nazi policy. It's rule number 1. No Nazism, no Nazi apologetics. Why should I include in my philosophy of thought a Nazi? Real simple, straightforward. No. I have a very strong no-Nazi ideology. So again, this should be easy, guys. Why should I include a Nazi in my philosophy of thinking? This is a Nazi. This is what this guy is writing about. This is what your boy is writing about, right? This is the rise of mega communism, right? This big, long, where he literally outright says, like, here's one of my favorites. Like, it's oh yeah, here we go. Hence, this childish nonsense of woke political theory. Like, this guy is saying, it doesn't matter. What about fat trans indigenous women? We the people and the universal statehood implicit in it is a purported intention, a conceit. It does not claim to actually know or represent every individual person. It is the purport of a state which seeks to act as a universal people, and thus an inherently abstracted form of the people in the institutional purport of their sovereignty, i.e., if a state will act as the people, it can only do as a pure form, which knows no distinction in content, i.e., between persons. So, fat trans indigenous woman, not part of the universal people, right? They're excluded from the universal people. Well, what does that leave you? What remains? Who are the universal people? No one is forcing you to like Schmidt. It's literally right here, dude. So I'm just going to start banning you guys. No Nazis, okay? I got a pretty strong no Nazi rule. And you guys are not explaining to me why I need to include Nazism in my thinking, so no Nazis, okay? Nazi apologetics goes out. Bye-bye. Maybe grow up. Right? Maybe actually read Marx. Stop reading Nazis. Like, stop reading Nazis. Stop including Nazis in the way that you think. Stop with the Nazi apologetics. You guys are creepy. It's really creepy what happened right here. Right? You're creepy, weird little Nazi apologists. And we all know what your plan is. Right? We know that your plan is to ignore people of color, is to ignore women, is to ignore the issues that the trans community has put forward. Oh, but we can all ally and come together until after power is attained, where we will continue to ignore you, at best. But what will actually happen is that the real Nazis, you know, the people who aren't cowards like you, who are actually willing to say that they're Nazis, and will use morons like you, will take power and then assault those people. Which is exactly what history shows us happens when we try to build these coalitions. These quote-unquote coalitions. Like, you guys are opening the door to Nazis, and it seems like you're happy to do so. Seems like you're fine with it. So you guys are creepy, weird little Nazis. Haz is a creepy, weird little Nazi. I will not debate a Nazi. I will just look at them and be like, you're a Nazi. Get the fuck out of here with your Nazi apologetics. If he's willing to publish a retraction of his Nazism, I'll read it. And also then on top of it, your boy is illiterate and stupid. Like, this is painful writing. This is very stupid. Stupidity is the word that I would use for it at the highest level. So get out of here, you weird little Nazis. Go back to your weird little Nazi cult and keep being Nazis, you creepy weirdos. Yeah. And Transylvanian's basically nailing it. Why not just stick to established Marxist-Leninist terminology instead of borrowing from dubious, to say the least, philosophy weirdos? Yeah. Why are we including Nazis? Why are Nazis even included in the discussion? Do you guys know that there's like a whole philosophy of thought called Marxism? Yeah, I'm sure the Vanguard will achieve intersectional governance after ignoring it the entire time. It's just childishness. It's just babbling childishness. Unserious, ridiculous childishness. At the highest possible level. Patriotic socialists are revealing themselves more and more and more to just be children who are too stupid to understand that, yeah, you probably shouldn't cite Nazis and use Nazis in what you talk about. It might appear to be alienating. Oh, yeah, I'll admit, that's bad optics, all right. Yeah, super bad optics. Yeah, it's worse than bad optics. It is including in your pattern of thinking Nazis. Don't. Like, don't. And by the way, your boy Haz is stupid. He outright said that America is already socialist. Like, embarrassing. It's just stupid. Jeez, fucking Louise, dude. What a bunch of losers these guys are. Come debate me, bro. Put me on your Discord. Come debate me. Not interested in debating people who are Nazi apologists. Not interested. 0% interest in that. Maybe grow up a little bit. Maybe stop paying attention to Nazis. Right? Realize that you should not be involving yourself with that shit. Like, when you read it, you should be like, okay, like, I'm reading this so that I understand who the devil is, so I understand who the evil people is. Here I am. Like, I read Mein Kampf, and I'm like, I don't turn around and then say, enter Mein Kampf. Huge red flag. Massive red flag. Burying you in a grave. You're not debate worthy. You're not intelligent. You sit with Nazis. fuck off. Margaret Mansell, pretty much nailing it here. Kind of ridiculous that abandoning solidarity with people would somehow lead to more solidarity with people. Just trust me, bro. Trust me. We'll all work it out after the revolution, bro. Trust me. Because that's how politics works. Like, not only are they sitting with Nazis and stupid, they're also childish. Yeah, they're also clueless. Yeah, this is how politics works. Right? We'll just ignore you completely and, in fact, shit on you anytime you try to involve yourself. But after the revolution, bro, everything will be fine, bro. Right. It's just stupid. You're too stupid to talk to. Like, that's the thing. Inverted Mystic writes, don't add him to your philosophy of thought, but you should definitely learn his way of thinking so you can make a strong argument against it. I'm listening to your stream while I work. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Inverted Mystic. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to read this stuff, that's how you should do it. But that's not what I'm seeing. That's not what's being done here. Right? That these boys came in here and tried to tell me that I should include Nazis in my pattern of thinking. No thanks. And the reason why they do that is because they would be Nazis. Right? That if they were living in a period of time where Nazism was prominent and the Nazis were taking power, they would just be Nazis. They would certainly not speak out against Nazis, right? As I presume straight white men, right? They would just slide right in and fit right in as creepy, weird little Nazis, which is what they are, basically. Transylvanian writes, if you want a revolutionary coalition, you would think you would want to include those groups who are the most radical and easily radicalized due to their material conditions and lived experiences. Yeah, I mean, it's extremely suspect. It's extremely, extremely suspect that a group of people, a group of white men, basically, would... Inverted, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt when you say, just because he's a Nazi doesn't make him a Nazi. Yeah, no, I said it out loud, and I was like, that's a joke. I've just kind of got my hackles up. Yeah, I know. The second I said it out loud, I was like, yeah, come on. I've just got my hackles up, man. Like, it's just... What this group is, and I'll say it again, is they're a group of people who are trying to square the circle. They see in their society how it's in decline. They see that it is unjust. And they're trying to square the circle of that injustice with their own bigotries. That's what it is. And they can't. It's not possible to do so. That they want us to believe that the path forward is through ignoring settler colonialism, ignoring the history of the United States, ignoring slavery, ignoring the genocide of the First Nations people, ignoring all of this, while simultaneously putting your faith in straight white men. Right? Like, that's the argument. We should ignore all of these institutions, all of the history of the United States, and put our faith in straight white men. And those straight white men are telling us, don't worry, we can sort this out after the revolution. Yeah, I'm sure you will. You and your Nazi buddies will sure work us out after the revolution, for sure. Deeply suspect. Deeply suspicious, deeply childish. Transylvanian writes, it would be like the Bolsheviks dismissing Jewish people and their concerns because they were a minority in Russia. Yeah, whereas in practice, Jewish people were among the most highly represented among the revolutionaries because they had the least to lose and the most to gain from revolution. Yeah. There was a section of the Internationals. They called themselves the Bund, that were the Jewish organizing groups. Yeah, inverted is like, they might not like kill people, but they would just do nothing, right? Which is the pitch, right? Really think about that. Like, that's the pitch. That's the pitch that these guys were actually making in the chat today, right now. That was their pitch. That we should ignore people of color. We should ignore. We should ignore women. We should ignore queer people, trans people. We should ignore them. But after the revolution, we won't. Sure, bud. Believable. Unserious, childish garbage. Content. Yeah, here you go. Communists have talked about partisans. So why do they invoke Nazis for partisan talk when you can invoke several communists? Yeah, thanks, Content. There you go. That's a really interesting point. Like, why are we including a Nazi in this conversation at all? If there are all these communists that have talked about the partisan, if it's such a thing that all of these communists are discussing it, then why are we citing the Nazi at all? Why is the Nazi in the conversation at all? Like, guys, this isn't a dog whistle. This is a dog foghorn. This is like a dog red flashing light. And like, I'm going to really put it to you, okay? I'm going to really put it to these MAGA communist types that come in here and act so dim-wittedly and arrogantly and stupidly. If you guys are so unintelligent that you include in your literature literal Nazis unintentionally without the intention of evoking Nazism as a core of your philosophy, if you are that unintelligent, then you are too unintelligent to govern. You are too unintelligent to lead. You are not intelligent. If you are so unintelligent that you literally write about this Carl Schmitt guy in your writing and think to yourself, oh yeah, that's fine, you are too unintelligent to govern. You are too unintelligent to lead. That whatever you attempt to do will result in failure. Because you have no self-awareness. You have no self-analysis. You are stupid. Transylvanian continue. So we need to ask ourselves which group today have the most to gain and the least to lose. It's minorities who experience compounding marginalization due to capitalism and patriarchy / white supremacy. Like, I just think like these guys are incapable of putting themselves in the shoes of the subhumans that they reject, right? That they refuse to actually take the position of a person of color. They refuse to actually take the position of a woman or a trans person or any of that and actually hear what's being said from that position, right? Because fundamentally their argument is we should ignore them, right? So you can't take the position of another person if your plan is to ignore them, right? You can't see yourself through their eyes, which is why they have no self-awareness. Neil, I don't really know what your point is, Nilo. Sorry. Wizard's Bread Book writes, breaks in solidarity are breaks in bargaining power. Like some people are silly, but breaking solidarity is counter-revolutionary. Shit, so feds do advocate for it. What is a bigger break in solidarity than saying we should ignore the history of settler colonialism? Like, what's a bigger break than that? No Nazis in the chat, please. Just don't comment. No Nazis in the chat. Like, what's a bigger break in solidarity than just denying the existence of settler colonialism, its importance, the perspective of people of color, the perspective of queer people, the perspective of women? What's a bigger break with solidarity than that? I can't even imagine a bigger break in solidarity than that. Like, you guys are just selfish. Like, you think the world revolves around you, and that your issue is the only issue that needs to matter. And you've created this really creepy philosophy that includes Nazis. Like, just garbage. Which makes sense, given how poorly articulated this Haas guy is. It's wild watching you guys go to the mat for this guy when he's, like, obviously dumb. Like, just look at the way he writes. It's just unintelligent. It's a person cosplaying at intelligence. Yeah, they're just saying get over it. I've never heard that before from hard right-wingers. I've never heard a hard right-winger say just get over it. Excluding the most oppressed from a revolution isn't a liberatory project. Yeah, that's my point. Which is what MAGA communists do. And they were in here just arguing just now that we should exclude them. Right? That we should ignore people, women of color, that we should ignore people of color, that we should ignore women, that we should ignore all of these issues. Right? Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Wizards. Just trying to sniff you out a little bit, my man. You're new to the chat, so. And we just had a bunch of these MAGA communists, and they're still coming back in. These creepy little Nazis. Dude, it's totally fine that we talk about Nazis in our foundational documents. It's completely fine, bro, because Zizek did it. Well, Zizek probably discussed it. Like, just the lack of self-awareness, I think, is the biggest red flag. Like, that's the biggest red flag. Let's take for a moment that these guys aren't Nazis. Right? Let's just take for a moment that they're not Nazis. Okay? Let's just pull back on the Nazi thing for a minute. Well, they're obviously clueless. Right? Like, they're obviously not capable of governing. They're not capable of being leaders. Their position actually is, let's ignore women, people of color, and queer people. But for real, bro, we'll definitely do stuff after the revolution. Just trust me, bro. Have a good one, Margaret. Like, that's their actual position. And then when they write, they include in their writing not like citations to people who have, like, not by degrees, but literally the Nazi himself. It's cluelessness. It's just cluelessness at the highest possible level. It is doomed to failure. And the reason it's doomed to failure is as obvious as can be stated. Even if you believe that you are there with good intentions, you are reaching across the aisle to people who do not have good intentions. And those people who do not have good intentions will use you. Will use you to gain power, and once they have power, they will betray you. That's what you're setting yourself up for. So while you're alienating the primary victims of the system of capital you claim to want to seek a revolution over, and reaching over and shaking hands with Nazis, the rest of us are looking at you aghast, because your entire argument essentially boils down to, trust me, bro. And the answer is no. I don't think I will. I don't think I will. A revolution only for the patriarchy just seems like liberalism, but after a wealth reset. Ah, what a great way of putting it, Wizard's Bread Book. I'm going to read that one again, because I think that's really prescient. That's a really good statement. I'm always impressed at the people who are in here, man. I'll say it over and over again. Like, sometimes you guys say things that's just like, oh, wow, yeah, that's exactly right. I could have never said that in a sentence. But here it is, Wizard's Bread Book. A revolution only for the patriarchy just seems like liberalism, but after a wealth reset. Wizard's Bread Book. Like, it's not even sure to do anything about climate collapse if they can't be trusted to have solidarity. Like, Inverted Mystic says, I overthink stuff a lot. Sorry, I hope I don't annoy you. Oh, no, you're beautiful, Inverted Mystic. No. I'm so glad that you're here. You're so polite and so nice, and you're contributing to what's going on in such a lovely way. So please, don't feel like you're annoying me. I am here to read your comments. It's my favorite part about doing this. Honestly, sometimes I stop reading your comments, and I, like, read an article, and I gotta tell you, I usually stop reading the article about halfway through because you guys have said some interesting stuff and I want to talk about it. You guys really are the reason why I keep doing this. Like, really. Like, you guys are the reason that I keep hitting record. Right? If it wasn't for you guys with your beautiful comments and your beautiful solidarity and your beautiful inspirations and your desires to push me and keep sending me new information and sending me new ways of looking at the world and stuff, I definitely wouldn't hit record. Like, I definitely, if this was just me showing a bunch of articles and you guys just being like, yes, thank you for that article, Jonathan, I'd probably stop. But that's not what happens. Like, you guys keep coming in here and you listen to me with my kind of off the cuff, speaking from the heart most of the time. And so many of you have this ability to distill things into just single sentences and single phrases and single words. And sometimes some of you guys feel that you need to correct me just in, like, pronunciation or just basic facts and things. And I'm so grateful for that, because I think that that's so helpful for me. It's helpful for me to have these, like, little adjustments and these little tweaks. And I'm so grateful that anybody even cares to actually say that stuff to me. So I'm so grateful. Anyway, like, share, subscribe. Transylvanian says, that's not to say we shouldn't appeal to the majority. You can't have a revolution without the broad masses on your side. But this doesn't require betraying minorities, who could be your best allies. Yeah, I mean, like, it's a very opportunistic position when you think about it, right? It doesn't really have principles. It just says find who the largest group is and appeal to them no matter what. It just is bereft of these kind of appeals. The task of the revolutionaries is to unite those broad masses with the most revolutionary and class-conscious segment of the population. Yeah, and it just seems to me like the patriotic socialist movement and the mega communist movement begins with a break of solidarity. It starts by saying no solidarity with these groups unless they appease us, right? Unless they ignore the history, ignore their own issues, and just bend the knee to what we want as straight white men. It's just a total break in solidarity. I just don't think it can be taken very seriously. Like, if these guys were actually interested in reaching across, and I think it really shows you, actually, that they have a kind of lack of self-awareness of their own position. They lack the awareness that people of color queer people and women are going to be suspicious of them, right? I think that's really fundamentally what it is they lack the awareness of understanding that those groups are going to be suspicious of you. They're not just going to go, oh, a bunch of communists, or a bunch of people who say they're communists. Tra la 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 la. You need to do solidarity building. You need to start by saying, hey, I'm interested in class issues. I'm having a class discussion. I understand that your issues intersect with that, and I'd like to have that discussion. That's how you build solidarity. But if you begin with the starting point of saying, I'm just going to ignore your issues and you just need to follow me, the strong white man, you're done. Like, you're finished. You cannot be taken seriously. Except as a threat. A bunch of straight white men seeking to do a revolution while ignoring our issues. At best, ignoring our issues. Compton, here's my question in regards to cultural questions. Why can't the privileged drop it? Like, how do I make space for someone's Christianity? Why my secularism is the space for that? My religious neutrality is not some animus to enact anti-Christian pogroms later on. Transylvanian writes, I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to liberal identity politics, which have been cynically used by capital to reclaim and defang progressive movements. Yeah, I've talked about that before. How liberals will use identity politics in order to silence the conversation surrounding class. And I think my larger point has become, as my position has matured, my position has become, then we need to take that away from them. That we need to discover and recognize and realize the intersectionality between those identity issues so that they cannot use that as a shield any longer. That if they begin to pull away and focus on identity politics, we know exactly how to move that back and intersect it into class issues so that they lose the shield. They no longer have the shield. Right? Because what they do, right, is they attempt, you start talking about class, and then they want to talk about the culture war, is what they want to do, right? But communists recognize that those quote-unquote culture war issues intersect with communist thought, and that we should know how to be able to do that. Transylvania says, which brings me back to what I said on the previous stream, which is that patriotic socialism is inverted liberalism. I think that kind of speaks to what Wizard Breadbook said here, right? Which is, it's just liberalism with the wealth reshuffled, right? That you take a different group of people and put them at the head of what is fundamentally a liberal structure. And so it has like this liberal stream to it, and this liberal thought to it. I love that those guys genuinely think that they're smarter for including Nazis in their thinking. Like, that's the best part. That's incredible to me. Yeah, by including a Nazi in my philosophy, I'm actually smarter. That we should have a huge array of things to discuss, and we should be well read and well spoken. Yeah, but you've adopted it. Like, you've straight up adopted it. Like, fuck off. to the extent that anarchy is a political ideology rather than a goal and a praxis, if your revolution doesn't do the work of not reproducing the same political conditions that required the first one, it's all a waste of time. Yeah, I'm getting a bit introspective here because I think about my own work and what the communists around me have been saying locally, right? And what this is all about and what we're trying to build, what it is we're trying to do. Because I do work locally. I don't just do this. I also do other stuff. And I really pay attention to what those other revolutionaries have to say, because they're also putting the skin in the game, and they're also getting on the ground, and they're very intelligent, well-spoken, well-thought people. And they will say consistently that it's about, and the big reason why they're all about educating themselves, and it's like a reading circle and all this kind of stuff. Initially, I was a bit like, okay, but it's about convincing the masses that you have the right to govern. That's what it's about. It's about convincing the masses. Like, Lenin very famously was not in Russia when the revolution happened. And he was actually writing weeks before the revolution happened that he didn't think that it would happen in his lifetime. And then 2 weeks later it happened. And he comes back to Russia after the Tsars are deposed, and he finds like a bourgeois state has erected itself, that the intellectuals, the merchants and manufacturers have kind of taken control and created a provisional government, a bourgeois government. And so how is he able to take power? Well, it's because the people trusted him, that he had earned their respect and he had earned their trust. And he'd done so by the consistency of his vision, by the passion of his vision, and the veracity by which he fought for that vision. And whenever he got into talking about excluding different groups, it was the bourgeois. It was always just the class distinction. And I understand that it's difficult to listen to people you don't respect. Right? If you don't respect black people, and if you don't respect women, and if you don't respect queer people, and if you don't respect trans people, it can be difficult to actually listen to what they have to say. But if you don't do it, you won't earn their respect. And you won't have the right to govern. Because they won't want you to govern. Because they won't know who you are, at best, which is the position that I was told just now. Right? We won't know who they are. Because we'll ignore them. So we won't know who they are. Or they will know who you are, and they'll see that you hang out with a bunch of Nazis. The people are not going to give you the right to govern. You're not going to earn the trust of the people. And it's that foolishness, I think, that is basically the death knell of the patriotic socialists. They cannot earn the respect and trust of the people while actively ignoring huge sections of those people. It's just not how it's going to work. Like, I understand that it's more difficult. It's more difficult to organize in the United States. That the experience of like the average Russian peasant was pretty similar, right? Well, that's not true throughout the United States. It's more complex. Well, that's the job. The job is understanding the society you live in, understanding the people who live in it, understanding the patriarchy, understanding the structures that you live in, and showing that you understand those things and that you care about what those institutions, what impact those institutions have on the society that they're looking at. That's what it's about. It's about building trust. And saying that you should build trust with far-right Nazis while fundamentally ignoring the issues of the victims, suspicious. You'll never govern. Except to govern essentially how the country is being governed now. That's all. Wizard's Bread Book writes, I think the reason I fundamentally hate the bus metaphor for electoralism, get on the bus that gets you closer to where you want to go, is that not only are they both going the wrong way, it's that we could have had trains instead. Yeah. Dude, the Nazi apologetics, man. That's what's haunting me. That's what's getting at me. Yeah, I'll restate it, because I think it's worth restating. If you are citing Nazis in your work, like uncritically, you are at the very least clueless. Like, just clueless. That is a very, very suspect thing to do. And just because you point at other people who have done the same thing doesn't make it less suspicious and less clueless. Like, that really shows a lack of awareness. That's what really shows a lack of awareness. Yeah, it's a tactical error for building a successful revolution. That's exactly right. Because you need to convince people. Like, if your argument is we're going to reach across the aisle to far-right individuals to try to pull them towards communism, well, the very first thing you need to do is show that you are a trustworthy communist. Failure. And these boys coming in here and acting this way in this chat only entrenched me further in that position. Just the Nazi apologetics. Straight up, just the apologetics. No, it's fine, bro. It's cool. What? We're supposed to read everything. Okay, bud. Like, there's a difference between reading it and adopting it. Right? Like, I've read Mein Kampf. Doesn't mean I'm going to be like, as Adolf Hitler said in my writings. Unless it's to say, as Adolf Hitler said, this quote, and that's why he's bad. Yeah, it can't even succeed at all because of the reason they say it's worth doing. Well, like it does just fundamentally boil down to just trust me, bro, while I do absolutely nothing to earn your trust. That's what's called white privilege. That you, a straight white man, feel that you should be taken at your word and trustworthy for no reason at all. That you haven't earned anybody's trust. And when you cite Nazis and reach across the aisle to Nazis and explicitly say we should ignore minority groups, but it'll all be okay after the revolution, you are fundamentally saying, just trust me, bro, while doing absolutely nothing to earn that trust. It's arrogant. It's abusive. It takes people for granted. And the answer is, from one straight white male to another, no. I don't trust you. I don't trust you to be capable. I don't trust you to be competent. I don't trust you to be thoughtful. I don't trust you to be wise. And I am certainly not going to turn to the people of color in my life, the queer people in my life, the women in my life, and tell them, don't worry about your concerns, just trust the straight white men. Just stay quiet and sit in the corner while the straight white men work it out. Nope. That's a no. That's a big, fat, greasy no. Transylvanian writes, there's something that these chronically online people like Haz are missing. The information space is not the main battleground of class struggle. It's on the ground, doing the tedious but vital everyday work of a revolutionary. Educating, standing up for labor rights, tenant rights, minority rights, and so on. Showing your solidarity. I am still reticent to call all of these people Nazis. I think a lot of them are just deeply misguided and confused, and sort of brain broken by liberalism and by online social media culture. Yeah, I think that that's a more fair way of saying it, Transylvanian. I think you're right. That I do think that like liberals can engage in Nazi apologetics just like everybody else. Isn't Haz anti-strike action? Yeah, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't know that I care to dig too much deeper, right? Like, woke CIA drone pilot writes, Pat Socks are very ignorant. One of them streams on Twitch as Monero Report, and he was just freaking out when I told him the USSR under Lenin decriminalized homosexuality. Haz thinks the homeless are somehow the modern bourgeois occupying the sidewalk, demanding rent. To be fair, like, and I always try to be technically correct with this kind of stuff because it is actually the truth. Like, Lenin did not decriminalize homosexuality because he was like, homosexuality is right and should be decriminalized. It's because the entire code of the Tsar was overthrown. And the reason why homosexuality is recriminalized under Stalin is because the people re-implement sections of that code that were overthrown. that they look at one another and say, well, we should write down a common code, right? Like, there was still, like, a common code under the Tsar. Like, there's still some things there that we should keep, right? And so they reinstituted sections of it, which included the criminalization of homosexuality. And modern sentimentality says, these guys are homophobes, and wow, what a homophobic thing to do. And it's like, no. Like, I mean, they just didn't have a sexual liberation movement or a gay movement. It didn't exist. There literally was nobody talking about it. And so it wasn't like, when we think about these things, we think that they're done with like this intent, when in reality it's just passed as like okay, it goes down, it goes up, right? It doesn't, like, there's no celebrations in the street. You understand? Like, there's no groups of people being like, rah, rah, rah. There's no pride movement, right? There's none of that happening. So it's all just kind of like, and I think that that's important to point out, because I do think that people get lost in the sauce on this specific issue, that they put a lot of weight on it, when the truth is that Lenin and Stalin put literally no weight on it at all. They don't write about it. They don't talk about it. It's not in the discourse. It's not something they communicate about. Like, the issue of homosexuality is just a non-issue as far as the Bolsheviks are concerned. That the decriminalization of homosexuality is a byproduct of the revolution, and the recriminalization of homosexuality is the reinstitution of what they would call common law. And that is how that went. Like, would it have been great if there was a gay rights movement in Russia under Lenin and Stalin were like, you're right, let's do it, rah rah? Sure, but that's not what happened. So I always try to keep a very realistic position on who these men were, right? Because they're not gods or icons. They're just men trying their best, and they achieved a lot. But what they did not achieve at all is a gay rights liberation movement, because such a thing didn't exist. There just wasn't one. And all of that is to say that I do find it a little odd that anybody would kind of lose their minds when you say that Lenin criminalized homosexuality. Right? Oh, Inverted wants to challenge me. It's revisionist history to say stuff like that. What makes you say that? What makes you say that? Wizard's Breadbook says it doesn't matter if they're Nazis, reactionary fascists, liberals, or incompetent leftists. They only post and fundraise. If they wanted to be doing something good, they could join a food, not bombs. Like, they are really distinct financially from the self-help motivational speaker Ponzi schemes, right? Oh, Inverted, you're agreeing with me. Okay. Yeah, great man theory is liberal in my opinion anyhow. I don't think it is liberal. It's just, I think that communists are as guilty of it as anybody. I think that it's like, there's a deeper, I think it's something that exists within the human consciousness that's deeper than the isms, right? That I think that anyone is susceptible to it. That you can pick your special little boy, and your boy is special, and everything he did was right, and we're going to go to the mat and fight and die about it, no matter what. No matter what they did or they said or any of that kind of stuff. I'm going to fight for it, 100%. And once you get into that mode of thinking, I've seen Marxists do this. Like, there's for sure Marxists out there that have chosen their special guy, and their special guy is just not capable of wrongdoing, right? And once you get into that mode of thinking, you lose the ability to use a materialist historical analysis about them, right? Like, you lose the capacity. If you venerate a person to the status of a great man, right, that great man status, you lose the capacity to do a material historical analysis about them, and to actually be a little bit honest about, their failings and what they could have done better, and how, like, I'll talk about one that I think about pretty cleanly. At the end of his life, Mao launches the Cultural Revolution, right? Because he's not going to capitulate to capitalists. He's not going to see capitalism come in to his society. He sides with the revolutionary youth, right? Who understand that a capitulation to capital is coming, and don't want to see it happen. And so they fight back against it, and Mao supports them. I don't want to say that, like, Mao was wrong for doing that. That's not accurate. That it makes all the sense in the world that Mao would do that. Like, I can sit here and say it would have been better for China to avoid the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, what they call the 10 years of havoc, the 10 years of chaos. It would have been better for China to avoid that. A decade of chaos and havoc, where the schools get closed, where people get, students get sent out to the countryside, and it's very chaotic and dislocating, right? Like, Xi Jinping's sister dies during the Cultural Revolution because of the persecution. So it would have been better for China if it didn't happen. But at the same time, when you look at Mao, you really realize there is just no way this guy is going to do that. There's just no way this guy is going to do that. Even though he knows it's coming, he knows it's going to happen after he dies. Like, he understands this. He knows. He met with Nixon, for Christ's sakes. He knows. But he's just not going to do it. He's not going to be the person that ushers it in and who governs it. And it's completely understandable. But if you have this, like, Mao can do no wrong attitude towards Mao, that's how you end up with this, like, very, very militant group of communists who call themselves Maoists, who are like, every solution is about picking up a gun, and power originates from the barrel of a gun, and we need to shoot and fight at every opportunity. It's like their solution. It's like their Worf in Star Trek The Next Generation, right? Like, they're the guy who's just like, photon torpedoes armed. And they need a guy who are like, hold on. Hold on. Let's not immediately jump to the photon torpedoes. Let's see if we can negotiate our way out of it. Right? Inverted says, like, judging people through a modern lens is not adding anything to the conversation. Yeah, like, hindsight is 20/20. Yeah, like, it would have been great if they had had a gay rights movement under Stalin or Lenin. I would have been like, yeah, great. But it just literally was not in the conversation at all. There's just nobody. Like, who's leading the gay rights movement in Russia at that time? Wizard's Breadbook says, I trust the communists more that still kill their heroes while learning tactics about material conditions. Yeah, killing their heroes, I think, is really important. Like, the analogy that I've always used about this is, like, a big part of growing up. I actually say straight out that the delineating line, the thing that makes you a grown-up, because there's a big question that sort of looms. What makes you a grown-up? When are you grown up? Well, the moment you look at your parents and you realize to yourself, these guys were just a pair of monkeys trying their best. They didn't have a hope in hell. They just did what they did because they were trying their best. And the stresses that they're under and the difficulties that they're under. And maybe they're not good people. Right? Like, maybe they're not. Maybe they are kind of self-absorbed and shitty and all that. Like, maybe. Right? But that doesn't make them demons. Because that's the second trap, right? The first trap is believing your parents are gods, infallible beings. And that can hang on for a long time. And then the second trap is believing that they're Luciferian demons. Evil of the highest order. Narcissists. Well, they're neither of those things. They're just people, like you. And the moment you realize that that's true, that they are just people, and they're trying their best just like the rest of us, that's the moment you're a grown-up. And if that happens when you're 12, or if that happens when you're 68, that's the moment. Demand Better, good to see you again, my man. For some reason, I'm just seeing your live now. Keep up the great work. A blessing. Thank you, Demand Better. And I think the same of communist leaders. That the moment you say these were just men trying their best in extraordinary circumstances, that's when you really connect to a historical material analysis of them and who they more accurately must have been. Yeah, I think this is a good point, actually, Inverted. You can sit there all day and say Mao could have handled it better, but it basically adds nothing to the conversation. Yeah, I mean, you could say you can try to learn something, right? I'll give you a real moment when I think Mao actually did something really shitty, right? I think this is straight up. I will actually criticize Mao about this one. He went through a policy of let 100 flowers bloom, right? And this was a policy of he opened up and basically created a policy of free speech. And he said, and this is after the founding of the People's Republic of China, where he says, let's let everybody air their grievances. Let's have a truth and reconciliation moment, right? We're going to have a truth and reconciliation moment, and everybody is going to say what their concerns are, and they're going to levy their critiques at the government, at me, Mao, and we're going to go through this all together to have truth and reconciliation, to air all of the grievances, to air all of these difficulties that we've had. And everybody thought that's a great idea. And so it didn't last very long before Mao clamped back down on that and then actively punished a whole bunch of people for the things that they said during that period of time. I just don't think that that's particularly helpful. Right? I think that that's like a good old bait and switch. Right? And what's that going to do for the future? Well, the next time anybody stands up and says, hey, we should talk and have some truth and reconciliation and all this kind of stuff, people are going to be like, yeah, we'll get right on that. Yeah, Transylvanian. As Marx said, the new society after a revolution is always going to be economically, morally, and intellectually still stamped with the birthmarks of the old society, from whose womb it emerges. That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you, my man. That is a good note to end on. I'm actually well over. Surprised. I've been ending early, so I'm glad that I've gone over. I feel like those mega communists really put a lot of energy into the stream. What a moment. What a moment. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you, is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.